All right, welcome ladies and gentlemen to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. It is 6:09 p.m. And we're going to call the meeting to order. As authorized by Section 551071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any agenda item herein. City of Rowlett reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or called executive session or order of business at any time prior to adjournment. Process for public input. If you're not able to attend in person, you may complete the citizen input form on the city's website by 3:30 p.m. the day of the meeting. All forms will be forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission prior to the start of the meeting. For in-person comments, registration forms, instructions are available inside the door of the City Council chambers. We've called the meeting to order. Item number 2 is the work session. And we need to, item 2A, administer the oath of office and the statement of elected appointment officer to the newly reappointed members. Susan, have you already done that?
No.
Okay.
I just was handing out their packets to you.
Oh, okay.
So, if you have one of these, then all new members will have to do this, and some of you that were reappointed will need to. And I'll just go over the forms real quickly, and then we'll all read this first page just together. And that's what this is. This is your actual oath. So we'll read it, and then you'll just sign this first line right here, and I'll take care of the rest. The second one is your statement of elected appointed officer, and that one you'll just read and sign and date. The third one, or I think, is this is your confidentiality form. So this is where you'll decide if you want your information for open records requests to be confidential or not. And I believe part of it is regarding your email, and then the other part your phone number. And so you can look through that and make that decision. But I want to bring up at the very bottom, because some people miss this, there's a little box. And if you do decide that you want your information confidential, but you were okay with us giving it to another commissioner, and if one of the commissioners asked to get in touch with you, then please click that box, because if that's not checked, then we won't give it out to another commissioner. So if you have one, you don't have to do that.
If we want to keep it confidential, do we need to put our email address anyway?
I think that, let me see,
Right under disclosure agreement?
right, that's it. I think that they're asking if you don't want it.
Right.
If you're choosing not to have it confidential, then put the email address that you want on there.
Okay.
And then when you can fill these out and just get them back to me whenever, and I'll make your copies and return it to you the following meeting. So if we want to just all kind of start at the same time and read the oath, would that be fine?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, so, are you ready? Okay. Go.
I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Rowlett, State of Texas, and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and this state, so help me God.
And that's all I have.
Okay, perfect. All right, at this time, we are ready for item 2B. Election of a chair and a vice chair for the 2022-2023 term. And I didn't think I was eligible, but I was corrected on that today. But
I can't believe it's already been a year since we did this. Blows me away.
I am eligible for one more year, but if someone else, at this point, we just need to take nominations for a chair. Y'all want to start with the chair first?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
I'll nominate Lisa Estevez for chair.
Second. I was quick.
All in favor?
Wow. I had no idea that was gonna happen.
That was quick, though.
Did y'all plan that behind my back? No, I'm
Don't
just
say
joking.
those on, well,
Well, I am very honored, and thank you very much. But actually, is that a formal vote? No, it wasn't. Okay, we have a motion on the, or a nomination on the floor for Lisa Estevez to remain for her final year on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do we have and we had a second
Yes.
by Peter. All in,
We can't vote as alternates.
As an alternate?
no, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I mean, we're voting.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Were y'all in favor? You didn't raise your hands.
I was definitely in favor.
Okay,
I raised the
that's
first time.
unanimous.
I thought she'd already
All
come.
right, well, thank you. I'm honored. Now we need to vote in a vice chair, and do we have any nominations for, yes, sir?
I'll nominate John Cote for vice chair.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Engen. So we have a nomination for vice chair of John Cote with the second by Mr. Seegers and a second by Mr. Engen. All in favor? Please raise your hand. And that was unanimous. Okay, that was easy. Item 2C, we will now receive a presentation regarding roles of city staff in the Planning and Zoning Commission by
me.
our fearless leader,
Oh,
Manal.
goodness. Well, thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I'm Manal Moladon. I'm the Managing Director of Community Development and Engineering. And today I have the privilege of sitting down with our existing members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, but I do welcome all our new members, although alternates. I'm sure you'll all get an opportunity to serve on the commission and sometimes make easy recommendations and sometimes not so easy recommendations. But staff is at your disposal. Should you have any questions, we will do our level best to try and answer them. And the purpose of today's, I'm going to call it a conversation, hopefully, and that's what we'll have, is to get you to provide you a little bit of information about, what, from a functional perspective, what are the roles of the Planning and Zoning Commission, what are your responsibilities, and then from there, what are the responsibilities of this development review team, which is, comprises of a larger umbrella with specific functions associated with it. I think it will be a great opportunity for all of us to ask questions. We may not have all the answers, but we've been meaning to have a training. We were just waiting for the new members to get seated. And with that, I'll move forward. I don't have a clicker. I'm used to a clicker. We're used to sitting at City Hall. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but there is a meeting, a council meeting, so we had to improvise and sit in the annex. So who is community development and engineering? As I mentioned, I'm Manal Moladad. The community development department itself is a larger umbrella, as I mentioned, that offers an almost turnkey solution as it relates to land development and then sustaining the components of the development. So we have our building safety team, which is basically where you have your plan review, your building permits, and your building inspections. You have your planning and urban design team, which basically is the catch-all and the front face of all development-related queries, whether it's a resident, whether it's a larger developer, what have you, but all those questions fall under this bucket. Planning and urban design team that you see right here is the development review side of things, and they do the day-to-day operations to realize development. But as part of that, we also have our neighborhood planning team, and they are responsible for neighborhood engagement. Well, we also have our neighborhood services team, and as I mentioned, we then, have the responsibility of managing other components related to development. And we have our code team, which makes sure that everybody complies with your basic requirements of making sure your grass is not too tall, making sure your fence isn't falling over, those types of things. And then, of course, we have environmental health, which looks at your restaurant inspections, your mosquito standing water, mosquito issues, those types of things. Animal services again is responsible for ensuring the safety of our animals in the city. But without our engineering department, which you can see is referenced there too, and we have Jeff Cohen, our engineering director, who's sitting there behind you, without having that function of understanding if we are going to have a development, what do we need, how do we connect and play, or plug and play to make sure development is functional. So they do all the below ground infrastructure. And then beyond that, they're also responsible for the capital improvements program. So when you see a bond election that's passed by City Council, then those elements are then realized by your engineering department and the CIP program. Next slide, please. So I'm going to now do a bit of a shift, and we're going to talk basically about the development process from a functional perspective. It's not as simple as saying, I want to do A, B, and C on my property. There are specific requirements associated with that. Those requirements are in place for the safety and welfare of not just the existing community, but the entire city and the development itself. So the development process is a turnkey process which is put into place to ensure all aspects and stages of the development life cycle are addressed. And what, to simplify it, basically, you have to have the right entitlements in place to be able to do what you want to do. And that's your zoning component. If you have the zoning that you need on your property and you're going to develop it, then you have to submit a plan that shows what that would look like. And that is reviewed from your development review team. But we need to know, as I mentioned, the below ground infrastructure also has to be in place, and that's what your civil team does. That's what your engineering department does and reviews civil plans. And of course, to ensure that the property that we're looking at has the meets and bounds, or the description of that property is indeed the ownership of the individual who is doing what they're doing, you would have to subdivide that property, which we call a subdivision plat, post which you would then submit finally for your building permits, secure those, and then you can start your vertical construction. Once your construction is complete, in order to occupy the building, you would request a certificate of occupancy, which we call a CO. Next slide, please. So today what we're going to talk about is the authority for planning actions, roles, process, and practices of planning, comprehensive planning, zoning, development review, and voting procedures. And we're going to talk about the P&Z, and we're going to talk about staff as it relates to that. Next slide, please. History of the Planning Commission. The formation of city commissions actually dates back to as early as the 1900s, and citizen-based, non-political boards were tasked with studying broad municipal topics, a broad range of municipal topics. And through that, zoning became one of those components. And that's when a lot of communities started realizing planning and zoning commissions. The city council started appointing planning and zoning commissions. Next slide, please. So what do we do here in Texas? We follow the Texas Local Government Code, and all the aspects related to municipal government is pretty much addressed in your local government code. But from a standpoint of the Planning and Zoning Commission and what I talked about development, there are three major sections that apply to us. I'm speaking collectively. Chapter 211 of the Local Government Code governs the zoning process. If you recall the second or third slide that I showed you that flow chart. Chapter 212 addresses your subdivision requirements. If you recall, I said in order to, formalize property ownership and the boundary of those properties, that's the platting process. And then Chapter 213, which allows communities to develop or build a comprehensive plan should they choose to serve as a forecasting or a guiding tool. Next slide, please. So the Texas Statutory Authority, let's talk a little bit about that. Texas adopted the Standard Planning Enabling Act in 1927. And this allowed cities to adopt and impose zoning regulations. What that means basically is that your zoning regulations would be how much of your land you can cover with concrete, what the building heights must be, how many parking spaces you need how far can you be off the street, how close can you be to the street, those types of things. Those are your zoning development requirements, your regulations. We are a home rule city, and in that case, per the local government code, the requirement to appoint a planning and zoning commission or a zoning commission report on zoning matters to council was required. And then city council would act on any zoning would act on the zoning cases, post a report from the planning and zoning commission. So these reports in your packet for your public hearing, for example, is the report that we then forward to the city council, which serves as this report reflecting your recommendation to the city council and staff's recommendation to you, the planning and zoning commission, and the city council. The map that you see on the right is basically our statutory requirement to notify property owners within a 200-foot radius of the area in question, which is that purple circle that you see. We go above and beyond that, and we notify within a 500-foot radius. Next slide, please. What are the general functions of the Planning and Zoning Commission? And I'm saying planning commissions here because I'm speaking of generally in our surrounding municipalities, what do we see? And from here we will dive into what exactly we do and what our functions are as a P&Z. Well, you do serve in an advisory capacity on zoning. Planning and zoning commissions are responsible for comprehensive plan update recommendations. You are required to act. You don't serve in an advisory capacity or a recommending capacity on plats. You are responsible for action on subdivision plats. Your development code updates or your zoning ordinance updates. Some commissions have site plan review and approval requirements. We do too, depending on certain square footage thresholds. Alternative landscape plans. Major warrants, those serve as your variances in the form-based code. Some P&Zs or planning commissions have architectural review committee, and they are responsible for reviewing development. I think Rockwall has one, if I'm not mistaken. Some planning and zoning commissions serve as the advisory committee for your impact fee update. And then, of course, planning and zoning commissions can be assigned into stakeholder engagement groups, ad hoc committees, or other areas in plan studies. Next slide, please. So City of Rowlett's Planning and Zoning Commission, what are your responsibilities? You act in an advisory capacity to the City Council. So what does that mean? Zoning cases per Section 211 of the Texas Local Government Code requires you to hear a zoning case, requires you, one, to hold a public hearing, make a recommendation, which would be your preliminary report, and then after your recommendation, that report is formalized and sent to the City Council as your final report. You're also responsible for ordinance amendments. Again, depending on the type of ordinance and which code it is located in some cases it is a public hearing, and in some cases it's not. Regardless, any ordinance amendments also have to be approved by council, so you would be acting in a recommending function at that time. Plat action, that's the record, subdivision plats, determining boundaries and areas and lots and those types of things, is an action that you complete. Comprehensive plan updates, again, those would be addressed by yourselves in a recommending capacity to the City Council. Next slide, please. What is staff's role? Staff serves in an advisory capacity to you, the Planning and Zoning Commission. We review zoning requests or rezoning requests. We provide the land use analyses as it relates to that specific request on a land use item. We provide our analyses on site design. We review subdivision plats to ensure compliance with state and local codes and ordinances. We prepare staff reports, agendas, and meeting minutes. We provide customer service to property owners and developers seeking to make changes or find information regarding their land use rights, their entitlements. Additionally, staff is bound by ethical obligations of their profession, such as planners. Their duty is to the public, to their employer, and to their profession. So I want to emphasize that when we conduct a land use assessment and we prepare a report, our role and responsibility is to ensure compliance with our codes and ordinances. And if we feel or deem necessary from a subject matter expertise that needs to be changed, that would come as a recommendation with a justification as to why. Next slide, please. The next few slides are very interesting because they talk about mutually inclusive relationships of the Planning and Zoning Commission with the City Council, our residents, us city staff, developers, and the Board of Adjustment. You can see that your role basically influences the next step, so to speak. And the City Council relies upon you when they make their determination or take action on a zoning case, for example. So your relationship to City Council, providing independent recommendations and perspectives based on adopted codes and policies. You inform City Council of important trends and issues that are emerging in the community. And that's through through the reports that you send to them. You also, P&Z, meet annually with the City Council, where you present to the City Council what your year has been like, and if there are any items that you haven't asked for as we develop the budget. The City Council relies on you to consider long-term implications of zoning and development proposals. Next slide, please. What is the relationship to our residents? So they look to the Commission to protect their interests. And we've seen that in some of the zoning cases that you guys have had the fortune of addressing. Expect full open debate on issues. I don't know if our new members have seen some of our meetings or have attended some of our meetings, but this Planning and Zoning Commission is stellar. They listen to every topic, and they also afford each other the respect and the community and our residents, and from there it results in a very organic conversation. So sometimes the challenges that the Planning and Zoning Commission faces, here is a zoning case that perhaps aligns with or may need to deviate from something, but the residents and their opinion is there too, and it becomes a challenge because you then are saying, you want to do absolutely what the residents want, but the proposed request may not necessarily be out of character for that area. So those are some of the challenges that I think the Commission has faced this past year, quite frankly. Next slide, please. Relationship to the developer, landowner. They also look to the Commission to protect their interest, and they want their applications to be, reviewed and assessed in a fair manner. What are the challenges? From a developer's perspective, one, speed due to cost of delays, but often these delays are due to quality of information provided. So it is a two-way street. If we receive an application, the information in the application should be to the point where it is, consistent with what the requirements are in order to be able to provide the information necessary. That doesn't always happen, which then could put a bit of a squeeze on the P&Z as it relates to determining what's going on with a zoning case, for example. Again, balancing cost recovery versus economic development will be a big issue that you will hear while you sit in this positional capacity. Next slide, please. What is your relationship to the Board of Adjustment? The Board of Adjustment is an interesting one. State law authorizes the Board of Adjustment, but not the Planning and Zoning Commission, to approve variances to the zoning regulations. Zoning regulations, building height, building setback, lot coverage, those types of things, driveway widths. So what is that relationship? So P&Z could approve an item subject to a Board of Adjustment granting a variance. Now, this may sound, let me clarify what this means. So let's assume we have a development that would eventually require some form of setback from Board of Adjustment. If the zoning is approved, then they would have to secure that variance from the Board of Adjustment. But if the Board of Adjustment denied the variance, the entitlements would have to revert to what the basic ordinance states. But the importance of staff here is to make sure that the P&Z clearly understands what would be applicable should a zoning case be amended. So they would be able to weigh the appropriateness of the request. The Board of Adjustment may recommend changes to regulations if they receive multiple variance requests. So what would happen is, if the Board of Adjustment saw, well, in this zoning designation, and Mr. Cote is looking at me and saying, the form-based code and dwelling unit sizes, then why don't we do something about it? So those are the types of things we're referring to. Next slide, please. Well, you also have a relationship with us, which is staff. Our goal is to make sure that, yeah, did you hear the sigh from Mr. Cote? Our goal is to make sure that we are your technical expertise. We support, you know, in terms of subject matter expertise. We provide you that information. So we carry out also the administrative functions, analysis of zoning requests and plan reviews that I mentioned earlier, provide information and research on relevant topics. We keep the commission informed on development trends and issues. Some of these members on the commission are serving on the Rowlett stakeholder engagement group too. So that's one of the things I mentioned. I cannot forget and point out Susan Nix. Without Susan Nix, we would not be having a meeting because she organizes, arranges, not just the dinner you're eating, making sure you get the packet, making sure the notices are posted, making sure she calls each one of you and says, are you going to come to the meeting tonight? So she also prepares the minutes that you will read. And sometimes those minutes do get pulled off the consent agenda because there are questions or maybe we missed something. Our goal is to minimize those types of hiccups, but they do happen. So we can't avoid those. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we provide you the tools that you need to be able to make the decisions that are important to the city. Next slide, please. Am I running out of time, Carlos? Basic information.
You're doing great.
Thank
Our
you.
meeting didn't start till 7. I don't know why they're hurrying.
So our regular meetings are the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. There are times when we will have a special called meeting depending on, do we need to have one? Is there a specific case we need to look at? Because maybe with the schedule and the holiday season coming upon us. Now, we hold our meetings, you hold your meetings the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. In order for us to prepare you with the information you need for that, staff is responsible for a schedule that they create that has specific submittal deadlines for zoning cases to come in so they can continue on this path to hit these deadlines, which is not just sending out a notification process, but actually reviewing the application, making sure the information provided for that zoning case is indeed correct, making sure the property owner has signed and notarized a form saying, yes, I know there is a request for a change in zoning on my property. The meetings are typically held in city council chambers. Today, because of, we had National Night Out and then we had to change some meetings for city council. We are in the annex. When there is a meeting on the same day, which happens often, then we typically end up in the annex. I think council has used this annex once or twice. Our meetings are televised and they are streamed on, and you can get to that link on our website. Next slide, please. Structure of agendas. I'm sure you've all seen the agenda by now. In terms of the structure, we have a section for public input, citizen input. Anybody can attend a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Anybody can speak at citizen input or public input. They have 3 minutes. They do not have to speak to an item on the agenda, but any information received at citizen input cannot be addressed by the PNC. If someone wants to speak on a specific agenda item, they can fill out a speaker's form and speak to that, and they will be called by the chair. You can see that we start with, you call the meeting to order, you have your citizen input, you have your consent items, and from there, you have your public hearing items. Items for future discussion identifies issues to schedule on future agendas. This is where the chair and the commission can ask the staff to bring other additional items to the agenda at the next meeting. Next slide, please. Voting procedures. So, conducting a public hearing, consider information in the staff report and take the public testimony under consideration too. Ask your questions, discuss and deliberate, make a motion, act on the motion, and then make that recommendation to City Council. You also have the opportunity as a commission to table or postpone an item should you feel that maybe you don't have the information, or maybe the applicant has requested it of you. You have that option too. Sometimes motions fail when they don't receive a second, or when you don't get the vote to carry the motion. Supermajority rules, keep in mind that if a notice is sent and property owners respond, and we're calling it the 20% rule, the way it's calculated is that if there is opposition to 20% more of that land area under consideration, then a unanimous recommendation has to come, a supermajority recommendation has to come from the city council. We, in the city of Rowlett, have another caveat to that is, should the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommend denial of a zoning item, then the city council should have a supermajority to approve it as well. And as we...
To reverse it.
To reverse it, right, to approve the action, right. So we will hit on these as we go through our meetings, but these are points that you might remember as we go through the meeting. Yes, sir.
It's 20% of the residents that are notified?
Within the 200-foot notice.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Next slide, please. Comprehensive planning. If you recall, I had mentioned the comprehensive plan, and we have some seats up here too. We had talked about the comprehensive plan serving as a guiding tool. Next slide, please, Susan. So what is a comprehensive plan? It is your long-range guide. I cannot emphasize enough that a comprehensive plan is a guide for future growth, development, and redevelopment of our community, of our city. Basically, we have to answer some questions with a comprehensive plan. Where are we, and what challenges do we face today? Where do we want to be? What is our future? And most importantly, if we have a defined future, which we all do, how do we get there? So these are difficult questions to answer, but your comprehensive plan tries to address those. Now, comprehensive planning cannot be conducted in isolation of your infrastructure programming as well. Next slide, please. So, authority to plan. In Texas, the local government code provides the authority to manage land development. Chapter 213, and you'll be hearing about these chapters a lot. Chapter 213, which manages the comprehensive plan, is intended to ensure that your growth ensures the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Next slide, please. The purpose of a comprehensive plan is to promote sound development of municipalities, promote public health, safety, and welfare, conform with state law as articulated in Chapter 211 of the Local Government Code for zoning subdivision decisions. Zoning regulations must be adopted in conformance with the comprehensive plan. You will notice that as we do, if you choose to recommend a zoning change and that requires an amendment to the comp plan, the City of Rowlett's zoning ordinances are written that way, where the comprehensive plan then is amended, and so is the zoning map to accommodate the change. So we do not do a separate comprehensive plan amendment. Most communities in the Metroplex do not do it that way. They do it how Rowlett does it. It is a basis for capital and annual budget decisions, especially from an infrastructure perspective that I just mentioned, and it also drives your economic development decisions. Next slide, please. A comprehensive plan is a foundation document that, Susan, would you hit the next slide, please? Establishes and guides city policy. Go ahead. Yeah, keep tapping it, yeah. Combines city plans into one comprehensive document. Informs zoning and zoning decisions, so we're really closing all this out. Informs on your capital improvement plans. So, vision, policies, action, maps, and implementations is what it ends up looking like. You have your future land use plan to the left, and that is the vision that you look at to determine what your land use pattern is going to look like. It's color coded deliberately because planners like colors. You have the yellows, which is your single family, your red, which is commercial, purple being industrial, blue being municipal campus. Just generally speaking. You also have a master thoroughfare plan that you have to take into consideration when you do your planning. You have to look at your water and wastewater plans. You have to look at all those functions and elements and see how they come together. Now, any planning at this scale and the code ordinances does not happen in a bubble. It's not just Carlos and the team sitting down and saying, this is what we want to see. It involves the community, it involves the business owners, it takes everybody under consideration. But most importantly, you also have internal stakeholders. And so what that means is that
Is this where everybody's supposed to come? For Rose Creek?
yes.
Yes?
Not yet, but we're on another meeting.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of people. So really, the comprehensive plan also, as I said, does not happen in.
Would you like me?
One of the other officers.
So it does not happen in isolation. We have to make sure your fire department is involved, engineering department, parks and recreation department, economic development. All these departments play a vital role in the creation and ultimately the formulation of this document, then goes to the stakeholder engagement group, and then to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and finally for action by the City Council. It is not something we can do in a matter of 2 or 3 months. It takes a year or so to build such a vast document. Next slide, please. This is where we usually sit. You can see some of our older council members there and our city manager sitting there. But this is what council chambers looks like, and this is where most of your meetings will take place. Next slide, please. We are currently in Recode Rowlett. We are very excited about this. We have created a scope of work and engaged with a consultant who is assisting us to rewrite our development code, which is the Rowlett Development Code and our form-based code. We kicked off the project in August. Some of our commissioners actually serve on the stakeholder engagement group already, yes. And we are in phase 1. We should be kicking off with phase 2 very, very quickly. And you can see that in spring 2024, hopefully we'll be able to have an adopted code. The last time we adopted, did a complete overhaul of our development code, I don't know when, but our Rowlett Development Code dates to 2006. So we're very, very excited about this. Following on the heels of this, we are very, very hopeful. I am cautiously optimistic that we will be able to move forward with a comp plan amendment too. Next slide, please. Recode Rowlett, we need you to help us. We have a survey that's out there. Please take the time to look at it. You don't have to, be in a specific discipline to be able to do that. We would really appreciate that. Next slide, please. Zoning and development. What is zoning? Basically, it is a means of land control employed by local governments. And the word control should not be perceived with a negative connotation. It basically establishes development criteria to ensure cohesive and comprehensive development, to ensure there is no incompatibility of land uses. The division of a city into a variety of districts is also what zoning is, with compatible land uses, as I mentioned, and the establishment of those standards. Zoning is an essential tool used to implement the comprehensive plan, along with the subdivision regulations, infrastructure programming, and of course, economic strategies. Next slide, please.
Could you ask them
I just did.
You got more for me?
Well, they're filling out, I'll look at
So-
There's a bunch of them in groups, so you can get some.
Zoning in practice.
Are you good?
Tells a property owner what they can do and how they can do it. It sets expectations for the community. And it also is a tool to manage tensions between rights and restrictions. Next slide, please. Zoning actions, legislative action. This is not an administrative action. Decision-making discretion is broad. Zoning is discretionary. May take into account public testimony and facts presented in public hearings. Regulations must reasonably advance a legitimate government purpose. Next slide, please. Comprehensive plan. Jeff, could you ask them to keep, we can't, no, you can't close the door.
Have you let them know that we're in a meeting right now?
Been doing that. Can I close the door?
No, you can't. Carlos, would you?
Let them know.
No, but you could open it and let them know that we're in a meeting.
Yeah, I mean, open that.
You're welcome to look in, they just are interrupting the meeting.
So, some key takeaways. Zoning is a land use issue and it is discretionary, and you can see in parentheses I put CC, which is City Council. So if City Council takes action on a zoning item, it is their discretionary ability to do so. We have to take into consideration the comprehensive plan. Not always does a comprehensive plan have to be followed. And you never make arbitrary or capricious decisions. Next slide, please. This is our zoning map on the right, and just a blow up of it, and on the left, zoned out version. But this shows to you what our current zoning is and what those designations mean. And I know it's not legible here, but our website has all these static maps. We also have an interactive map that I'll hit on in just a second. Next slide, please. Planned development districts. P&Z, you've seen a lot of it. New members, you will continue to see some PDs coming before you. It is a special subset of rezoning proposals. It can be considered as its own district. A planned development is intended to accommodate a combination of various uses and may be developed as integrated land uses. It has to accommodate the use of alternate development standards and integration of uses that result in a higher quality of development. Underline, yeah, absolutely. So what I want to point out here is that when we talk about higher quality, I know that is a subjective term, but the purpose here is to say that you are creating development that will encourage additional development, that will encourage cohesive development, and that is meeting the intent and purposes of current development criteria and standards. Carlos, there are a number of people on that side that need to come here at City Hall. Excuse me, commissioners. Permit the imposition of development regulations specific to the development. A PD should not technically be used to alleviate or relieve yourself or circumvent the development code. The purpose of a PD is to say, I'm dealing with a property that might need something a little different, but you're taking into consideration that property and using that in relationship to what you want to do, and not just saying, well, I can't do this because these are my restrictions, so I'm going to go with a PD. That is generally not the purpose of a PD. That's when you need variances from the Board of Adjustment, for example. Conceptual plans and development standards are required as part of this. I do want to add that what some communities with planned development districts, they will allow, or they will approve, the City Council will approve a PD with a conceptual site plan. And let's say it's a phased development. Then the council, as part of that, anytime you're building each phase, they would have to come back in for the public hearing process and show compliance with their PD and get a detailed plan approved. Now, other communities do it as an architectural commissions board or an architectural review committee. So there are other means to do this. We do not do this in Rowlett. Okay, next slide, please. Special use permits. Special use permits are actually a zoning action. It is a formal zoning action, and so I'll give you an example of a special use permit. If there is a commercial zoning district, for example, and someone wants to put in a restaurant with a drive-through, the mechanism to allow that drive-through would require an approval by council of a special use permit. So that allows the community, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the City Council to have additional review to determine if that aspect of that use is indeed appropriate at this location. So it is a review and evaluation of site development features intended to ensure that the proposed use will not have an adverse impact on the surrounding built environment, the infrastructure, and our transportation corridors. The Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council after a public hearing. The approval criteria are very simple. It has to meet the intent of the zoning district, has to meet the challenges of some changing condition or trend, protect or enhance health, safety, and general welfare, impact upon your infrastructure, impact on the built environment, and the suitability of the property for the proposed use. There are 10 criteria that the local government code uses to determine the applicability of a zoning change. In your packets, when you see a zoning case, you will see all those 10 criteria listed out. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the zoning process. I mentioned to you that we have a schedule, and to get to the P&Z meeting, there's a lot of stuff that happens backstage, because what happens on stage, in order to do that, there's a lot of things that have to happen prior to that. So zoning process, pre-development meeting, we encourage all our developers, applicants, residents, whoever want to do something from a development standpoint to meet with staff. A pre-development meeting, pre-application meeting. Upon that, or after which, they file an application. Our applications are on our website, a zoning and concept plan. It could be also, keep in mind, sometimes you might not need to do zoning, or you've done your zoning and you go into the platting stage of things. Both of these require staff review, public notification of the request if it's a public hearing. We have the P&Z meeting and hearing, and then it goes to City Council. If it is approved, an ordinance is adopted the same night at the City Council meeting. Next slide, please. Zoning notices, we already hit upon this. The state requires us to notify property owners within a 200-foot request. We expand that to 500 feet. We recently changed our notification process, and council approved it, where anybody who is making a request for a zoning change is required to install a sign on the property with the specifications provided by staff on what that is to look like and where it is to be installed, with an affidavit. Our goal is to make sure that our community knows exactly what's going on, and we need a sign that is very, very visible. This was implemented, but we approved it 6 months ago, but we wanted to make sure the new budget was adopted, which has happened, and the next zoning cases you will see these signs will be put up. Next slide, please. We have rolled out what we call our development activity map, and we also have a development permit map. And can we click on that, Carlos? Can we drive that possibly? And what this does is it allows you, P&Z, it allows our community to go to our interactive maps and to click on specific areas on the map to tell you what's going on. We have a legend, a color code key to the left. And if you click on that, it'll take you to the location of the property and what's going on. Let's go ahead and show the P&Z what we're talking about. So you see that, we clicked on that, and it drops down what's going on with that property, where it is in the process. We're very proud of this, and I think it will really help. We've also done the same thing for permits, so that if something isn't going through an action that you have to touch, we're also doing that on the permit side. So you can see that we talk about plats, we talk about zoning, all that information is up there. Building permits are in there too.
That's very cool.
That's all on one site, right? That's as far as permits.
That's very good.
That is very nice. Yeah.
So we have been working backstage lately, so just want
That's the public side as well?
yes, absolutely. I don't know if the website is on there, but yes, the City of Rowlett website, you can go to the GIS division and go to our interactive map. Planning and urban, yes, sir.
Question,
Yes, sir.
on the Sapphire Bay area, there are multiple projects in there. That whole area looked as if it was owned as one project, but there are multiple projects. Does this interactive map show the other projects as well?
It should show them as a permit activity map. If it's not doing that, that might be a glitch. We'll check with Dale. What we did is we had a start point, so some projects that had fallen off, we didn't include those. The last activity that was permitted in Sapphire Bay was the Zale multifamily development. You can see the parking garage going up, but the K-Hop homes are also being permitted, so we'll double check that. I saw that big red, but usually you can hover around it and hit all the areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. This is the Planning and Urban Design Division's webpage. Keep in mind, like I mentioned to you, sometimes they're the net for everything that falls in, and they have to kind of fan things in whatever direction they need to go in. Next slide, please. Development regulations, we've talked about this at length. I will go ahead and skip this slide. Next slide, please. Development plans. The Planning and Zoning Commission is also required to review development plans if it is a single building larger than 25,000 square feet, or if it's a multiple building with an excess square footage. Now, the reason I brought this up is, if you recall, I mentioned in the first couple of slides roles and responsibilities or functions of the Planning Commission, and I mentioned some of them serve as an architectural review committee. This little aspect of things is also what you do, which can be perceived as that. Next slide, please. I do want to make one comment there, commissioners. Let's not forget that when all this was done, and then the architectural committees that we have, just recently, 3 years ago, the local government code was changed. And that change prohibited any municipality, and I can see you nodding, any municipality requiring building materials specifications. So we could not say brick, stone, masonry. Anybody can use whatever building material they choose to use, as long as it is permitted in the International Building Code. So those definitions are much broader and much different. Now, if there's a planned development district and the applicant chooses to say, this is what I want to do and this is how I'm going to do it, then we can say, okay, it becomes part of the ordinance adoption. Warrants and variances, we have the form-based code in the city of Rowlett, and any deviation from the form-based code requires modifications in the form of a major warrant, which is a public hearing, which means you become a recommending body, P&Z, and then it's acted upon by council. You're also responsible for recommending on alternative landscape plans if someone wants to do something a little different. Again, when there is a variance or a change or an alternative landscape plan, the goal is to work with your topography and do something with that, but not to just say, well, I'm going to clear cut because I can't do any of it. That is a very difficult position to be in at times. Next slide, please. Plats. This is a fun one. Lots of changes over the 3 years ago with how plats are reviewed. We now have what we call a 30-day shot clock. A lot of our communities are grappling with this. The Planning and Zoning Commission and staff has 30 days from the time a plat is submitted to the city to take action on that plat. You can approve it as is, you can approve it with conditions, or you can deny it. So there are options available, but our goal is to make sure that we fall within that window. It is not the role of the commission to review the plat, to look at the technical aspects of the plat, to look at the engineering, to look at the setbacks. If that plat conforms to the technical requirements stipulated in the local government code and with our local ordinances, that plat is to be acted upon. Now, I will admit, thank you, commissioners, for being a second pair of eyes for us, because sometimes we do miss things. And so we appreciate it. There is no harm in having a healthy discussion, commissioners, on what does this mean and why is it there. Our role is to try and answer those questions for you. But at the end of the day, a plat, it typically remains on consent, and it is an administerial function of the P&Z. Civil engineering plans have been released for the plat. Infrastructure has been accepted. That's when you approve plats. Sometimes we dive into escrow agreements if we need to do that to allow that aspect to happen later. Some plats are approved administratively, such as amending plats, minor plats where there's not addition of major infrastructure or increasing number of lots to more than 4. Next slide, please. Code amendments. Am I running out of time?
7:03.
I have 3 slides? Yep. Beautiful. So, from time to time, amendments are proposed to the development code. That's a public hearing. The recode is going to be one big public hearing. Comprehensive plan updates as well. So you can see we're going to start advertising recode Rowlett wherever we can, and that's why it's there again. Next slide, please. Zoning amendments.
That's cute.
Should I just say next slide? Do we need to say anything else beyond this? We love this slide because really, you know, sometimes a presentation shows something different, or your elevation plan that's submitted for review is different, and when the plans come in for review, it's actually not what it looks like. So we need to make sure that we're on top of this. We need to look at the big picture and long-term impacts of a decision. What is the best thing, highest and best use of this property? Is it compatible with your built environment? Does it follow established city policies? Next slide, please. Public comments on policy. Consolidation of many ideas into a policy consistent with the built environment, representative of all the stakeholders, and provides long-term value to our community. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you. So really, we need to flip on that slide. I think my team's names need to be above that, and I'm just assisting wherever I can. I thank my team continuously, and I thank you, commissioners, for all the work that you do. Yes, sir.
Are these slides available to the commissioners later?
Absolutely. We can do some magic and put them somewhere for everybody's review.
Thank you very much, Manal. That was awesome, as usual. A lot of great information there. I know that might have seemed a little overwhelming to some of the new people, but it all comes together after you come to a few meetings, and you'll get a feel for it. The next item was to convene until 7 p.m., but we've run over a little bit. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, before we leave the work session, though, I would like to go ahead and ask that we remove all the items off the consent agenda.
All of them?
Yes.
Okay.
So that would be the minutes and 2 plats?
Yes.
Okay.
And you want them in the items for individual consideration?
And can I provide some staff update?
Yes.
The preliminary plat for Creekside has been withdrawn, commissioners, and we need to remove.
Which item was that?
4C.
4C has been withdrawn. No,
Yeah, it should be 4C.
Also, it's been withdrawn.
4C, correct. So in terms of, we've got the minutes,
4B.
4A and 4B then would be 4B.
Okay. All right.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break?
Yes, let's do. We're going to, I've got 7:07. Let's break till 7:15. And at that time, we will reconvene. So short recess till 7:15. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we will reconvene the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. I have 7:16, Susan. And all the items on the consent agenda have been moved to items for individual consideration. The first being item 4A, consider approval of the minutes of the September 27, 2022 regular meeting.
Wait, we didn't do, we have to do citizen input, and I think you had a couple comments.
Oh, number 3, yes, I'm so sorry. All right, let's move back up to item number 3, citizen input, and I do have 1, right, Susan? Do you have any more?
No, I didn't want to, I think you had 2 for citizen input, I wasn't sure.
I didn't see but 1.
Okay, maybe
5C, 5C.
Who's the one you have?
This is Mike Bruton.
Might be somebody in the audience. Jeff, can you please ask who wants to speak at citizen input?
Is there a Mike Bruton for citizen input?
And you might.
He's coming.
Okay. Mr. Bruton?
Yes.
We're taking the items for citizen input. You have a 3-minute limit. If you'd like to walk up to the edge of that table, there's a microphone. Please state your name and address for the minutes, and you can begin.
I'm Mike Bruton, live at 5020 Flamingo Drive. I'm here speaking, I think I can speak for all my neighbors, about the plans that the city has for building an apartment complex and everything right across from us. And there are several reasons that it would affect our neighborhood. One would be a traffic situation.
Sir, you're actually, I believe, talking about item 5C,
Okay?
which is, we're going to have a public hearing on that.
Oh, really?
And it would be this evening.
Tonight.
So if you would rather wait and talk about it at that time when we're taking discussion on that item.
You can add 5C.
Well, I got started on it.
You'll have to start over, yeah.
Yeah, we'll know who you are, right. You've had a little practice.
Got all the
You
jokes
bet.
out.
Can we ask outside if there's anybody who wants to speak on citizen input so we can close the item? That's not on 5C, correct?
Or any other.
Is there anybody here who would like to speak on something that is not related to 5C,
5A
Or 5A.
5B, or 5A? No.
Okay. At this time, we will close the citizen input and move to the items for individual consideration. The first one being consider the approval of the minutes of the September 27th, 2022 regular meeting. Mr. Cote?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes with the following correction.
Okay.
And that is item 4B, conclude with, there was a second on the motion by Ms. Williams, and the item was approved with a 6-0 vote.
Did you get that, Susan?
5B, would you repeat it, please?
4B.
It was
4B.
item 4B.
And the motions were not in there, correct?
The motion was in there, but the second and the final action was not.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes with the correction to item 4B. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Lewis, and all in favor, please raise your hand, and that is the unanimous vote. We'll move on to item 4B. Consider approval of a replat. Consider action to approve the replat of Lot 2, Block 1 of the Springfield Plaza Edition, submitted by David Bond on behalf of property owners Wedgewood Development, LLC. The site is located on the approximately 200 feet southeast of the intersection of Rowlett and Hickox Roads in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas. Mr. Monsalve, are you presenting?
Yes, ma'am.
Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Chairperson Estevez, Commissioners. My name is Carlos Monsalve, and I'll present to you guys today. So as she just stated, we're here to discuss the Springfield Edition, which is located, next slide, which is located here in the corner of Hickox and Rowlett, right across from the fire station. So it's 1.82 acres, located approximately 200 feet from that intersection. It is zoned planned development district for limited commercial retail uses. to allow an 18,981 square foot medical and professional office building. If you've been in the area, you'll see that most of the infrastructure is already in place, and it's just a matter of going vertical now with the structure. Next slide, please. A little bit of more information on the site. The infrastructure has been installed, and the purpose of this replat is to dedicate easements. And so within those easements, you'll see utility easements, fire lanes, wall easements, and detentions. And I'll point some of those out during the next slide. The plat report in the P&Z packet does reflect a note which states
We've removed it. but-
yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and the applicant has made the proper adjustments. That note, when you look at the packet, will state something to the effect of,
I can read it for you.
it's not against our code per se, but it does state that separate instruments can dedicate additional easements, which is a typical condition, but it is better off to not have that note if it's not necessary. And so the next slide will show the plat without the note. And you'll see throughout here, most of this will be the access that will be surrounding the property. Most of the structure will be in the middle with Rowlett Road down the center. There is a detention easement that occurs towards the rear of the property,
Yeah, he
as
pulled
well
it
as
for
a
the
wall
note.
easement that surrounds it and sets it apart from the surrounding single-family neighborhood. And so with that, our recommendation is for approval of the plat. And I'm open to any questions you guys may have. Next slide, please.
Commissioners, any questions? Go ahead, Louis.
I have one question. I noticed that the building setbacks were not shown on this replat.
That's correct. And so that it's, again, and perhaps
So,
I would like to speak to that.
if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in on that one. The reason why we do not like to show building lines on plats is because if your code changes, you are tied to those setbacks. So any new development, let's say a development doesn't occur, anybody who wants to develop with the new zoning code up, or the zoning codes, would have to go to the Board of Adjustment for a variance to deviate from those codes. So generally, new planning practices is to avoid reflecting building lines unless absolutely necessary on those plats, because if you have a development that has dedicated 50-foot setbacks and those setbacks change with the recode, for example, then it's going to basically become a Board of Adjustment issue. And it can go either way then.
So a follow-up question on those easement layouts that you had on that replat, was there a significant difference between those and what you had originally?
We didn't change the easements.
So you're just formalizing the ones that you already had there?
Well,
I'm
the
just
replat
wondering what the
itself-
need of the
Okay, so let
replat
me
is.
rephrase. Before it was an empty, undeveloped property, so there weren't any easements on the land. They came forward with a zoning change for the planned development for C1 uses, followed up with a development plan, and now are implementing the easements that reflect the land use. And so with that, you'll see the fire lanes that surround the property and things of that sort. So every one of those easements is being dedicated with this plat, and so everything is new in a sense.
What I mean is typically I'm used to seeing those on either on a preliminary plat or a final plat. So when I see replat,
Replat.
in my mind, that means there was a plat before. Well, what was that plat?
Commissioner,
And what was
yeah.
what would be the changes, if any?
Sure, absolutely. When the area was platted, it was platted as a final plat just to show lot boundaries. It did not take into consider way back when any development. It was part of a larger development. And as we see property developing and exchange of properties occurring, this property is now being prepared for development for this multi-tenant building, which requires the creation of specific easements. And so per the local government code, because there were no easements on that property to support this development, those have now been included. You have a fire lane, you have detention, you have some utility easements that were necessary to allow this development. So it was a plat void of easements as a final plat way back when.
And that's often a result of subdivision as well. Well, you subdivide a larger parcel, develop one corner, and then the rest of it does not have any development activity planned at the time of the plat. So this would typically follow as a replat. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I want to just make two comments. One, for Mr. Frisbee's comment about building lines. I'll get to that in a second. But the second one was, the reason why I had it pulled off the consent agenda was to discuss the note number 1, which has subsequently just been removed. Okay, so. As far as building setbacks though, I think, I don't see a downside to having them on a plat. Because if somebody wants to redevelop that, they can come back with something else.
Aren't
We
they
can-
bound
we
by
can
the
appro-
zoning
We
though?
can approve that.
And all?
Okay. But if they're not on that plat, then somebody comes in with a project and there's concern over something being too close to the neighborhood, adjacent neighborhood, so they agreed to move that building line, much like the storage facility on Miller and Rowlett that we just approved. Okay, then those need to be there so that we know that that's in fact the way it's going to get developed.
But your zoning ordinance, and I just picked that up as a debate, but your zoning ordinance reflects what those setbacks are. To further compromise the plat with the building line, and let's say someone else comes to develop it, then what you're doing is you would have to vacate some of those easements to make it happen, when you might not need all those easements, or the infrastructure obligations change. So then you're talking, you can't just abandon, the easement as simply as, I'm just trying to give examples.
Right.
So
And
it's more of an ease of practice. It's not necessarily that's where I was coming from on that
Right.
one.
I understand the ease of practice, and what I want to do is make sure that that ease of practice doesn't subsequently give somebody an in
Yep,
to
no,
go do something that we don't, or the neighbors didn't want to happen. So, again, if it's not there on
Yeah.
on the plat, and the guy who doesn't
With the
sell
zoning?
storage decides, well, I'm gonna sell it to somebody else.
Yep.
And that person develops it up to where he thinks he can, I mean,
Right,
that's.
and so from a zoning perspective, Chairperson, I'll give you an example. We had a property that was with building lines, had 50-foot, it had double frontage property, 50-foot building setback. And they came in and had to move forward with the Board of Adjustment case, and it became very difficult for them to get relief from the building setback requirements that were required many years ago and are no longer applicable. And so the Board of Adjustment would not relieve them of those setbacks
Why?
because they felt there was no justification, which is why
There we go.
right, but then you compromise the highest and best use of the land with the new rezoning. That was the
But
flip
that's-
side I was referring
Right,
to.
but that's something that then the planning and zoning or the Board of Adjustment can go ahead and take into consideration and do, which is what, the whole reason why they're here.
No, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, if you wouldn't mind, maybe we could work session building lines a little more thoroughly with the P and Z on a future agenda,
Understand?
without compromising this class.
Okay, any other,
Yes.
Go
One other
ahead, John.
question. How is it that you have a building wall and a detention easement together on top of each other?
Yeah, so the dedications are different to themselves, and so one of them allows for access, but it does not allow access throughout the whole detention area. And then, just so you know, the detention area is underground, and so what that does is it also allows for the detention area to function underground, this access easement. And so it's not that it's separating uses, it is actually essentially overlaying them. So you
Can we-
can't have.
Could we turn back to that?
Yeah, could you go back 2 slides, please, Susan? Or,
Somebody.
Perfect. Yeah, so he's referring to this access easement,
Oh, well,
this
no,
wall
the
easement
wall.
here, and then this detention area.
Which includes that wall section.
Correct. And so all three are essentially over sharing space.
I was just gonna pick one to start with.
Yeah, and so the wall easement itself is right on the property line. Where the wall itself is on the property line, that wall easement is really intended for maintenance of that wall. So that you can have a way to access it, and it gives rights to the people who are doing maintenance to be able to access that wall. The detention easement simply allows for that utility to exist underground within those boundaries. And then obviously the access, the fire lane, and the utility easement allows for that circulation to occur above ground.
Right, so my understanding was that you can't build anything permanent on top of an easement.
Permanent in the sense that it,
Occupied?
well, yeah, so you can build things like sidewalks, you can build things that typically don't break too far underneath. It also really just comes down to permissions given by the authority that owns that easement. And so the engineer will speak to that.
Yeah, they're not, the structures are not coincident. So, in this case, it just seemed, I mean, the detention easement could have been drawn exclusive of the wall easement, but they didn't. And there is a pipe that has to come out near the southwest corner, or I'm sorry, that would be the northwest corner. Rather than going through all that line work, they just, and I didn't have a problem with that, Commissioner Cote.
So excuse me,
Yes, ma'am.
would it require some type of variance, or this is something that's already like,
This, it
Universal.
doesn't break any codes.
it doesn't break, yeah, I was just wondering, so it doesn't, it's like it's,
Right.
That's
and so,
exactly.
You know, there are certain instances in which easements perhaps could contradict each other. This
okay.
would not be one of those.
It would, okay, this wouldn't be, okay. So if there were two property owners, for example, they would have to be in agreement, like with the maintenance, or like when you were mentioning,
Well, the easements themselves gives authority over the area.
Okay.
And so the easement language itself shows that dedication, or in the dedication of that language itself, it provides who has the rights to operate within that easement.
Okay.
And so you'll see that very often with access easements.
that's right.
Where several people will have perhaps access to that, but it's still the property of the lot owner.
Okay, so when it comes to maintenance, like if there's an issue that occurs with that easement, you know, like breaking up sidewalks,
Right.
that would be addressed, I guess,
By the property owner.
by the
So
property
it's still
owner.
the responsibility of the lot.
It would still be, okay,
Correct.
good, all right.
I have one follow-up question.
Mr. Frisbee, go
I
ahead.
apologize for belaboring this, but I'm not as familiar with the replat process, so this is needed so that we could finalize the plans for construction, or is it already being constructed? And if so, where does it fit in the continuum of between where you are now and where you get your CO?
So the infrastructure, the site work is basically constructed. The detention pond is in, the pipe, the storm discharge is in and goes to a public inlet. The concrete site work is done. So really, this is, have they gone vertical? This is basically, I believe, so that they can go vertical.
So, Commissioner Frisbee, to answer your question, the way the Rowlett Code is written as it relates to subdividing property, in order to proceed with the building permit, the public infrastructure has to be installed and accepted by the city before anybody can execute on a building permit. And that's why we're at this stage right now.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's just what
I'll add to that just a little bit. One of the main reasons you'll see this, perhaps once it's being constructed, is because we want to assure that whatever was constructed as part of the infrastructure is actually within this easement. Sometimes it can happen where preliminary plat maybe differs from a final plat because during the development process, things were shifted or changed. And so that's why we typically wait until this point in the process to formally accept what the infrastructure and those easements reflect.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, commissioners? I guess we are ready for a motion then on this item.
I would like to recommend approval of the replat.
We have a recommendation for, we have a motion on the floor for approval of item 4B, the replat. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Ms. Wilson and a motion by Mr. Engen. All in favor, show of hands, and that is a unanimous vote. We move on to item on the agenda 5A. And before we get started, I would like to say to anyone, hopefully everyone out there can hear me, anyone who wants to speak on the public, we've got 2 public hearings tonight. If you plan to speak on that, you have to have filled out one of these request to speak cards. I understand there's going to be a group. The group, we will allow additional time. If you're here, if you're going to come up and speak individually, everyone has 3 minutes. And are we going to show a timer, Susan?
I can time on my phone.
Yes.
Okay, Susan is going to time these because it's easy to lose track of time. So when Susan raises her hand, she's over here in the corner, that means your time is up. And we're just doing that in respect of having time for everyone to speak. And we do that at every meeting. This one's not special. Okay, so item 5A, consider and make a recommendation to City Council on an alternative landscaping plan under Section 77-5041 of the Rowlett Development Code, that might be an I, to modify the incompatibility buffer landscaping requirements on property zone limited office O1 district and single-family residential SF10 district. The approximately 12.044 acre site is located west of Dalrock Road and approximately 1,400 feet north of the intersection of Dalrock and Miller Roads in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas. Mr. Mars? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Martin Mades, and I'll be presenting a cornerstone alternative landscape plan. So a development plan was administratively approved on May 25, 2021, which includes an approved landscape plan in compliance with the Rowlett Development Code. The request today is focused on amending the incompatibility buffer standards, primarily up to the south and the west boundaries of the site. As the property is adjacent to single-family development, the following incompatibility standards apply. A type 2 incompatibility buffer requires a 15-foot width, a masonry wall or living screen, 1 canopy tree per 35 linear feet, and 10 evergreen shrubs per 30 linear feet. The request is to place a living screen without a berm or wrought iron fence in the areas to be developed where existing trees do not provide some screenings. The living screen would consist of Neo R. Stevens holly plants having a height of planting of 5 to 6 feet and spaced 5 feet in between each other. The living screen would be installed within 10 feet of developed area rather than property line. So when you look here, you'll have the full property line, but more called out on the green. That's what the ALP is more intended to do, and have it closer to development rather than the boundaries for the plat. Next slide, please.
Yes, sir.
Do you know why they want to do that?
Yes, I'll get a little more into it, but from my understanding, it is, a lot of it comes down to maintenance, and there's a large separation from it. So basically, it would cost them more money upkeep, and they could input that more for the community as well.
So they're never planning to develop beyond those?
They would be, and we have conditions that would apply to it if they develop at that point.
Can we go back one slide? So the area just north of the planned north of the building, the current building, big empty space, that's their future development, right?
This is their development that they came in for the site development plan. all of this area here is empty and there's nothing proposed at this point.
I'm sorry, I was, okay. I was confused. I didn't realize they were actually gonna put a building
Yeah.
behind that building.
Yeah, so the
right
building's
now.
here, then we got the parking and really the roads that go through there.
So I guess my question would be, north of that hedge line then, is there anything they're gonna develop there?
Not currently then, no.
No, that's the other development.
That's the other development, you would have a road, I
No, no.
believe, coming through.
Wait.
Not here.
He's saying plan north, so that way.
To the
Like
right or to the
this
south
edge?
of the page.
See that row of hedges?
That's Del Rock Shore.
So this is Del Rock right here.
No,
Okay.
plan north. Okay, so as it's on the board, the top
Yeah,
right there,
that's
right,
the
that
top.
section right there,
So this plan, currently there's nothing here to be developed.
and they're not gonna do it in the future.
They can in the future, if they choose to.
Okay.
And so the recommendation, and I know I'm jumping ahead, is that with the next phase.
With item
Yeah.
2. And that's what I was wondering, was when's the next phase?
Which-
But I
right.
thought that was gonna be the next building up there.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Thank you, Susan. Are we on the right slide, Martin?
Yeah. So in terms of the current development plan, it reflects an initial phase, it'll be like an 8,000 square feet church. And in terms of the distance that you have from where the parking basically is to where the property lines are, is 340 feet to the north, 15 to 50 feet down Del Rock Road, 100 feet to the south, and 400 feet to the west. So that's kind of what I was speaking on, at least an area that is not planned to be developed at this point. Next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah.
The proposal to install the compliant buffers adjacent to the west and south areas of proposed development meets the screening and buffering intentions of the RDC. When the future phases are eventually developed, the required landscape buffers are to comply with the codes at the time that it would be installed.
Go ahead, Susan.
Susan, next.
So, staff recommendation is approval of the LP as requested with the following condition. The first one would be that evergreen shrubs having a minimum height of 3 feet at planting and space 3 feet on the center be planted adjacent to parking areas facing the south. The second is that the compelling buffers meeting the code requirements in effect at the time be installed with future development on the site. So that really would take care of if there's any development on those different sites. At that time being, they would have to meet the incompatibility buffers and add the proper landscaping that would be required there.
Commissioners, any questions for staff? Mr. Frisbee?
Could we go back to the overall landscape site plan? Yeah,
Yeah,
that one.
This one?
The next one, please. So the landscape buffer, the screening, the living screen that you had, that is required by ordinance, but isn't being provided in that little L-shaped wedge, is that because there's already a pretty dense canopy of trees there?
Yeah,
That's
so when
providing
you
somewhat of a visual buffer?
Yeah, so currently they're basically adult trees and it really does create that buffer there. So if you would go on site, you really can't see inside of there. So their argument was they would want to do at least what's developed right now and not get rid of any of that existing trees there.
And similar to the case that we had 2 weeks ago, you have a combination of the I guess the Nellie Stevens holly, but you're also proposing a canopy tree per 35 linear feet?
That's more what would be required, and that's what I guess the.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's the overall
Yes.
requirement, but they're not proposing to have the trees.
Correct.
Is that correct? So it's all the Nellie Stevens hollies.
Yes.
Correct.
And one last question, why are we allowing a 3-foot hedge when the requirement, I believe, is 6 to 8 feet? Or did I misunderstand that from last week?
Susan, could you go to the recommendation?
Isn't the living screen required to be somewhere between 6 and 8 feet?
Correct. And so the living screen does require 8 feet adjacent to a berm and adjacent to a wrought iron fence. And so this is a significant departure from that. And so that's why we are not necessarily calling out what they're taking out, simply stating that they are not following those requirements and they're proposing the wrought iron fence and the bushes at that height. And so
So if we allow them to put in the 3-foot height hedge, are we wanting them to keep it short, or are we wanting them to allow it to grow
we
to
would allow
the
it to
required
grow.
height?
It would be at, essentially at planting is what we would require a minimum of 36 inches.
And I'm okay with that. I just, if the code requires 6 to 8 feet, I would certainly, I mean, to help them initially, I'd say, okay, go ahead and put them in at 3 feet, but we don't want them trimmed at 4 or 5 feet. We want them trimmed at
Right.
6 to 8 feet.
And part of the reason
Once they
for
grow.
that is the distance that is actually from the property line. And so typically, this landscape buffer would occur at the property line.
Correct.
And so because we expect future development to occur, it is not as high as a requirement as we would expect at this time. And keep in mind that hollies and evergreen shrubs of this type do grow 2 to 3 feet per year, or can grow up to that point.
And this area is landscaped, irrigated,
Correct.
correct? Okay,
A
thank you.
requirement, yeah. Yes, sir.
And did you say you're putting a fence in here as well? Or they don't want to put a fence in?
Sorry, I may have misspoken. They do not look to put a fence on there.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, we are ready for our motion.
Don't you want people to speak?
This is a public hearing.
I know it's not, but you've got a 5A. People want to speak, so it's your discretion to hear them.
Okay. This isn't a public hearing, but we do have several speaker cards on this item, so I will start calling names. This is actually requested to speak as a group, and since there are, looks like about 10 or 12 people, I will give you 15 minutes for those. It's all under Brian Hyatt.
There's going to be one speaker for all of them, Madam Speaker. I'll speak for all of them.
Oh, okay, well, I was
Save you
just,
some
I
time.
wasn't,
No,
all
you're
right.
fine.
Well, then I'll just
They're
let
just over there
you,
looking mean for me, that's all they're doing.
I will let you go ahead and go up and.
Thank you. I didn't mean to
bet.
interrupt you. Good evening. Thanks for allowing us to speak on this issue. And thank you guys for serving on the commission. I know it's not a lot of fun and there's other stuff bigger than ours tonight, but Madam, thank
Name
you
and
for
address,
allowing
please.
us to speak. And this is, a lot of these people in here are my church. When we're done, we'll get out of your hair and it won't be so loud. So even though it's the other people who are loud, not our people.
We need name and address. Name and
Brian
address.
Hyatt. H-I-A-T-T, Brian with an I. I live at 8210 Woodside Road. In the Crime-Free City of Rowlett. So, and I'm also Pastor Cornerstone. And so these are my folks here. So we're asking for your approval for the alternative landscaping plan based on about 4 different things, which Martine did a great job. Working with him and Alex have been fantastic. And so I've enjoyed and meeting with them. But the wall that's required around 11 acres on the complete south and west side, as was on the picture there, the cost and the maintenance would be exorbitant. I mean, unbelievable. And as you drive down Del Rock, you see the walls, and that church would have to take care of, not a municipal or, we would be responsible for that. And also, a church like ours, we're active in Rowlett. We were there in the tornado. We were there in 1980. We've been there. We're doing great things in the community. We want to be seen. We want to be viewed. We want to be accessible, and a masonry wall would not allow that at all. That's not what we're about. We want the community to come, be a part, to see, and that's pretty well common sense. So the masonry wall would defeat our purposes of being seen and accessible to the community. So we would like that. And then Lastly, well, that money that we save, we're able to do better ministry inside of the city, which we do multiple things along with the other great churches in our town, of meeting needs of families and National Night Out, you name it. We try to do what we can to pay electric bills and all that, and to take that money and put it in a wall just doesn't make sense for us or the community. So I appreciate your consideration on that. And last but not least, we also, I have a PowerPoint. I sent it to Martina and them. I told them it's probably not, I don't know how good it would be, but I visited every church that's been built in the last 5 years in Rowlett. And some of the things we're being held to, they've not been held to. And so we would just like to be treated in that same similar way. That's fair, that is, and I had pictures I took at, I don't want to say the churches, I don't want to get them in trouble, but I mean, they're doing what you asked them to do. We like to be treated the same way as a church there in Del Rock. And our people have waited. COVID has knocked us back too far, and so we're trying to get things going again. And so we can take a budgeted of a landscaping that was unreal and take that money and put it into our building and also keep it in our community. And so I appreciate you guys allowing me to speak. And also, just on the point of that canopy, tree canopy that's existing, I know they talked about the headlights to the south. There is no way, and there's pictures in the PowerPoint, and they have it. You know, those headlights are going, I mean, we'll put the bushes and all that in, but that tree canopy is so thick, those neighbors, you might see 95% of it's covered by those existing trees. That's why we wanted to keep the canopy and use it. So, any questions I can answer?
Any questions, commissioners?
Are you gonna clear out some of that underbrush in that canopy?
We hope so. Eventually, we'd like to put a walking track in there, a dog people track, but COVID is, with prices and things, we've pulled that back, but that's a whole other discussion. But we'll keep as, obviously, all the trees that we can. So.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And your group. Yes, sir.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the alternative landscaping plan with the following conditions. 1, evergreen shrubs having a minimum height of 3 feet at planting and space 3 feet on center be planted adjacent to the parking area facing the south. And incompatibility buffer meeting the code requirements in effect at the time be installed with future developments on the site.
Okay, we have a motion for approval of this item with the city staff recommendations, both of them in the motion. Do I have a second?
Before we second, could I further amend that motion to make sure that those plants grow to a minimum of 6 feet before they're trimmed level?
John, how do you feel about
Is
that?
that a city code where they have to walk, where the city has to go around and measure those?
We just don't want them to be,
Was it your intention to have a 3-foot hedge around your parking lot or a 6-foot hedge around your parking lot? Sight lines or sight lines?
Well, my intention was not, because of that canopy being so thick, there's really no need for it from what I was, but I just went with the recommendation because it's not that big a deal. I mean, I'm thinking it's not. But with the tree canopy there, it's so thick, and as you are, you know, there may be a future time where we clean it out. But I mean, I understand why for the headlights and the parking. But we have, if you look at the map, very few of the spots facing south. There's more facing other directions.
Well, it's really, I think the biggest thing is if you come out of the parking lot and head south,
yeah.
Okay, before you make your turn, it's right there, and there's 2 homes right there and an alleyway that you go in there. So I honestly think that the 3-foot is to shield the headlights in the future, not necessarily.
staff okay with that?
Yes,
Okay.
that was the purpose.
Right.
Then I'll withdraw my amendment.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Cote that includes the 2 recommendations by the city staff. Do I have a second? I have a second by, you turned your name
Peter,
around.
you might want to help.
Peter. All in favor? And that is unanimous approval. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to item 5B, conduct a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council regarding request by Brian Swindle, Pulte Homes of Texas LP, on behalf of property owner Merritt Village Lot Venture Limited for a major warrant to Appendix 2.1 to increase the maximum dwelling unit area or a single cottage on Muse lot from 2,530 square feet to 2,730 square feet. The approximately 4,400 square foot residential site is located at 8714 Eldon Muse, situated on Lot 37, Block C of the Merritt Village Plat in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas. Mr. Munsell.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Chairperson Estevez, Commissioners. Next slide, please. We're here to discuss this single property here within the Merritt Village development and conduct a hearing to make a recommendation to City Council. This property is requesting to increase the maximum dwelling unit of the single cottage on Muse lot from 2,530 square feet to 2,730 square feet. And I'll explain a little bit more as to what that means down the presentation. This lot is 4,400 square feet, and it is located at 8714 Eldon Muse. Just a little bit of a background for those of you who are not familiar with form-based code. Properties in the form-based code can front on streets or can front on parks. When they do front on parks, or what we call green space or open space, typically a muse or essentially a glorified alley, a larger alley, will be established behind it in order to provide access for emergency services, post, trash pickup and things of that sort. And so in this case, we have a park that is established here and a green corridor that runs through here. And so Eldon Muse is to the rear of this property. And so all that to essentially say there is different building types that are associated with how they front. In this case, we have cottage, which is a medium-sized home for form-based code, and cottage on Muse, which is that same building type, but it fronts on a green space. Next slide, please. And so a little bit of background, this development plan was approved on November 14th of 2019, and it allowed the development of Merritt Village, which is a total of 131 single-family lots. The form-based code allows for minor warrants to be approved administratively, and that was done as part of the development plan approval. It allows up to a 15% increase, and then everything else typically has to go through a major warrant process, which goes through you as a recommendation to City Council through a public hearing process, which is what we're going through here. The request is for a 2,200 square foot increase to 25. I misspeak. When the minor warrant was approved, we approved an increase from 2,200 to 2,530 square feet. I do want to make a note that in the packet itself, in the executive summary, I did say 2,000 to 2,530. That was expressed correctly during the actual body of the discussion as 2,200. And so I expressed that note 10 of the new neighborhood standards in appendix 2.1 of the form-based code does allow staff to consider a minor warrant increase up to 15%. Yes, sir.
When did you provide that minor warrant?
When did we do it? Yeah. It would have been with the development plan that was approved on November 14th of 2019. Next slide, please. So just to graphically kind of show you a little bit of what those changes are, cottage and cottage on Muse, same building type, but different lot sizes. And so I'll show you a little bit more of that. The cottage, because it has a bigger depth of 100 feet as opposed to the 90 feet, does allow for a larger home. And so the required sizes for that cottage lot is 1,400 to 2,800. Cottage on Muse, on the other hand, has a 90-foot lot depth, same lot width, and so that requirement is typically reduced. I will note that the applicant has provided a lot depth that is in excess of what both of those requirements are. And so they have provided a lot depth of 110 feet for both cottage and cottage on Muse. But we are only here to discuss the cottage on Muse. And so, again, the requirement is up to 2,200. The minor warrant approved 15% increase to 2,530. The request here tonight is to increase that an additional 200 feet to allow for this single-family home to be up to 2,730. Yes, Mr. Cote.
I'm just kind of curious because how does this lot, and I can probably find out because, well, unfortunately I can't. How does this lot vary from lot 38?
From the one adjacent to it?
Right.
In
Looks
the
like
same-
it's the same depth,
It is the same depth.
same width.
Correct. And so the form-based code does require a variance, or not a variance, that's the wrong word to use, a diversity of housing. So it does require a minimum of, well, essentially, you cannot repeat a building type every 5 houses. And so one of the building types that they are providing with this neighborhood does require the excess of 2,730. That said, most of the other, or all of the other locations where this building type itself is being provided is provided within the regular cottage lot. And because the requirement is for 2,800, it does not have an influence on here. So this is not the only time that you'll see this building type or this building frontage, this elevation per se, but it will be the only time that you'll see it within this development or within the cottage on Muse lot type.
And are they gonna have to adjust the setbacks to accommodate the size? How much bigger is it than what the maximum is for that lot? 200?
Yeah, so the lot depth already is an additional 20 feet.
Talk about the size of the dwelling.
Yeah, so the dwelling typically would be up to 2,200. Again, most of the other houses have an increase up to 2,530. So we're only looking at a 200 square foot increase.
Yeah, they want to go to 2,730.
They want to go to
That's what it's
27.
Correct.
And it's not gonna affect the setbacks, the required
No,
setbacks?
and as I noted, there's already an additional 20 feet that we're working with within that lot. And so the massing of that house, and you can already go out there, it is on hold on the
I believe you.
construction. And so you can see the relationship between the houses.
So the additional square footage is in what would have been the backyard? Or where, you gotta give up some space somewhere?
Right, and so typically, because we have a built-to zone, that built-to zone does require the house to be to the front of the lot. It does allow for side setbacks. In this case, they are 5-foot side setbacks. And so really, the only area that we can expand is either up or back. In this case.
And that's
it's
what you
really
were
just-
asking, I would assume?
Yeah, it's really just an expansion of, if we have a 35-foot lot, we're only talking about an additional 1 or 2 feet to the rear of the property, if it's a 2-story structure.
Got it, thank you.
But I'm confused still.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because lot 44, 43, 42, 41, 40, 39, 38, 30, they're all the same size. So how is
Correct.
this one?
They just wanna build a
building-
bigger house.
Yeah, they
Well, but again, they couldn't because form-based new neighborhood has a certain percentage of homes that they have to build, and so where are they in that percentage? Okay?
All
Will they
these
fall?
they all fall under the same category, being cottage on Muse. And then you have the other types that are existing over here. You'll see
Which are
those
larger homes?
larger homes, front entry garages. And so the cottage on Muse will be one category, the cottage will be a separate category, and they're well within the range that is permitted.
There's room.
I understand.
Here's what we're-
So my question is, why doesn't this lot just follow the rest of those?
Really, it comes down to the property owner, for one, you'll read the letter, but.
I did.
Yeah, and so,
And it doesn't make, it doesn't make sense to me.
yeah, so,
Oh, I think I got a buyer who wants a bigger home and I
Yeah.
can put it here.
right.
Oh, okay.
And so it's,
Well-
again, it's the same lot type as the cottage, but it is typically required to be a significantly bit lesser.
So
lot
there
depth.
was not any of the larger lots available?
There were, but this property was essentially approved under those conditions. Once we noticed that we put a hold on it. And so we can go back and essentially retract not necessarily retract the permit, but amend the conditions.
We expect this to happen again for this?
No, they have made it very clear. Initially, they had a total of 10 building types that were intended for this area in communication with them. Because this one had already begun construction, they went back and they removed the locations of those other lots. And we're able to work with the property owners of those lots.
Do they have a floor plan? Is this like merely like an enclosed patio? What is the idea behind
Of
the
this
stretch,
increase,
the shotgun floor plan? What is the idea behind
I
it?
believe the presentation of the applicant.
We can
will show
ask
you
the
some
applicant
elevations.
Okay,
those
perfect,
questions.
perfect,
They'll
perfect.
have elevations and things like that.
Perfect.
And so, again, the request is for a single-family lot. Next slide, please. Public notice, this is a public hearing. And so public notices were sent, 200 and 500 foot radius. I will note that this property is largely owned by the same developer.
Same person. 33 times or whatever.
The thick packet that the responses in favor. That said, there were.
Are all in favor?
If you look
there
at
were
that,
not
you know,
enough
says.
And so, with that, staff does recommend approval of this request. Significant, or it's a very
Minor.
small impact with this one property, and it is a very small increase of 200 square feet.
Above what you've already
Correct.
given
Correct.
Correct.
as an increase.
Correct. And so, with that, I do open myself to questions, additional questions, I should say. And the applicant is here if you guys have, or he has a presentation.
Would y'all like to hear from the applicant, and then we can call them back, both back up?
I've got one question.
Okay, yes, sir.
So you already approved the first increase, this is an additional increase?
Correct.
Correct, minor
Okay.
warrant is
Thank
part
you.
of the development.
That's my question, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Sounds good.
Hi.
Do you
Please,
have a presentation?
please state your name and address for the minutes.
My name is Stephen Kendrick. I'm with Pulte Homes. My address is 2719 Morning Mist Lane, Nevada, Texas 71173. And so, thank you, Carlos. Appreciate it. So we have 53 lots in Merritt Village that we're building on. 25 are the Muse lots that he described, and then the other 28 are regular cottage lots. And we didn't just intentionally go build a house on this lot because the customer wanted it. We were told by the developer who sent us this, the building requirements, and as you see, it's 2,800. So that's what we based our floor plans on, and so we had sold that house, got a permit approved, and started construction of the home. Then we got 3 more sold, went to get permits, and they got stopped because they found out they were too large. So what we did, could you show the next slide, please? So we actually, these are the lots you can build 2,800 square foot homes on. We had sold a couple of these other Muse, so a total of 4, and the other 3 permits got stopped. So we had talked to Carlos about trying to get those, changed as well. He suggested it'd be much easier if we tried to move those homeowners to different lots. So that's what we did. We put them on the regular cottage lots over here, and in doing so, reduced their purchase price as an incentive for them to move. Next slide, please. So this is the home in question. It's name of the floor plan is the Westview plan. It's a very popular plan. We got the permit, started construction, and like I said, learned later in permitting the others that it was too large. And if you would go to the next 2 slides, these are the 2 houses adjacent to it. So this one, by looking at it, it's not a monstrosity that sticks out or anything. It was an error because we went by what the developer said the minimum square footages were, and so We're just asking for a warrant for this one particular home.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question for you. So again, pertaining to the previous question to staff, so where are you making up the extra square footage? Is it all in the back and the upstairs area, or?
It's in the upstairs area. I thought it would be better to show the elevations so you could see that the homes look very similar and it's not a monstrous house and two little shacks next to it.
These are beautiful homes. I commend you for building nice houses, but I'm just trying to figure out where the stretch is.
Where it is exactly, in the game room upstairs. I didn't bring the floor plans with me, I apologize.
That's okay. That's a good enough answer. Thank you.
You know, but we do meet all the setback requirements and everything.
So this is the house that's beside the one that you want?
Yes, and this is the smallest house in the neighborhood.
Which is on lot, what, 30?
It's the one on the corner next to the park.
It must just be a lot.
I believe 38 or 36.
Yeah, 36,100.
Oh, okay, 36. So if you're standing in the mews and you're looking towards the homes, this is on the left.
So what's on 38?
You go one slide backwards.
That one?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the home on the right side of it.
Okay. I'm sorry. And on 37, can we see that one again?
And this is the home I'm trying to get the warrant for.
Okay.
Does this elevation have multiple different square footage? Is that, how many square footage options does this
It
elevation have?
has different elevations with the same square footage. This is the exact
So
elevation
that's
that's
just,
being built.
that's, okay, we got it.
Yes.
Looks like it's in that upstairs area in that front.
Along with the other two that I showed, those are, I pulled the exact elevations
Okay.
that's being built.
Well, it
Okay.
sounds like y'all kind of got pulled into a bad thing just from some bad information provided you. And we know that you're a very well-known home builder and you're trying to do the right thing. And I thank you personally for getting the other 3 people moved. So we won't have to go through this again. And you won't either.
We elected to do that just to make it easier in hopes of
Oh,
we
they
could
didn't
get
have a
this
permit.
one
Right.
done.
Yeah.
Gave them a discount on their house so they
Right.
would face the street instead of the mews.
And you
Sure.
can't do that with this house because of what?
It's already built.
It's built.
Oh, it is already built?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I was not, I missed that, right?
It's already on the ground. You're right, it's already on the ground.
And I can't knock 200 square foot off of it.
It's already there.
Is that the actual picture of the house, just a rendering?
This is a rendering.
Okay.
I thought about taking pictures, but
Yeah.
if you've ever been in a community under construction, it looks like a war zone. There's equipment everywhere.
You'll get a nail in your tire too.
Yes, you will. My wife just had to have one of those.
Because you borrowed her car.
You must have driven her car over to the side.
She likes to go with me when we drive communities.
Madam Chair.
Not all my fault.
Yes, sir.
I've got one for staff or for the individual from Pulte. So, doesn't affect the setback, doesn't affect any of that. It's going to be in uniform with everything. All the other properties, correct? The setbacks are the same for.
Correct. It's all worked within the form-based code requirements.
And we have eliminated this floor plan from the community, so there's no confusion whatsoever. Most all the lots are already built on, so it's really not an issue anyway, but we eliminated the floor plan after we found out about this, so it wouldn't happen anymore.
Like a one-off.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions we need to move on for staff or for our applicant? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, any discussion, or are we ready for a motion? Oh, public hearing. Missed the last one, missed this one. All right, this is item
5B.
5B, and I do not have any cards. That's probably why I missed it. Is anyone here to speak on item 5B? First of all, I'd like to open the public hearing formally. Now, do we have anyone here that would like to speak on this item, 5B? Okay, Susan, have you got any? All right, seeing none, I will formally close the public hearing. Now I'm ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Seegers, go ahead. I saw his hand first.
Go ahead.
I'll make a recommendation to approve the approval of the requested major warrant.
We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Seegers for approval of this item. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
By Mr. Frisbee. All in favor? And that motion passes unanimously, and we are now ready for item, you bet, thank you. Item 5C. Conduct a public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council regarding request to 1, rezone 5604 President George Bush Highway from single-family residential SF10 district to planned development PD district for mixed residential and commercial FB, UV, and C1 uses, and approval of a concept plan. Item 2, amend the comprehensive plan. And item 3, amend the zoning map of the city of Rowlett. The subject property is an approximately 12.58 acre tract located east of President George Bush Highway and approximately 800 feet north of Lakeview Parkway, situated in the Henry H. Hall abstract in the city of Rowlett, Dallas County, Texas. Ms. Waldell, yes ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson, Commissioners. Thank you for reading out the request. Chairperson, as you can see, the subject property is reflected in the red-colored parcel area on the map in front of you. It is in between residential development and the Covington's Nursery. It currently is developed with the Rowlett Church of Christ with some undeveloped parcels. The property is not platted. As you can see, the property enjoys some frontage along PGBT, direct frontage along PGBT itself. Next slide, please, Susan. The request before you, Commissioners, is for a rezoning from a SF zoning district to a PD for urban village district and commercial uses, because the applicant is proposing to develop the entirety of the site with a two-phase development for multifamily and commercial uses. It would be integrated with ground floor commercial of approximately 15,000 square feet in each phase, with vertically integrated multifamily development, townhomes to the north, and some open spaces containing common area, pickleball, obviously the other amenities associated with the entire development. Some of the commercial development would house the leasing area on both sides. Again, it is a phased development. I'll be a little more specific. Phase 1, which is the area in green right here, contains 354 multifamily dwelling units. Phase 2 contains 348 dwelling units and 10 townhomes. Based on the information provided by the applicant, there is a 5-story mixed-use building, which is right here. I mentioned already the 15,000 square feet retail commercial area, an integrated parking structure, and I do want to point out that there is a discrepancy in the site plan provided by the applicant, where the site plan reflects 12,000 square feet of ground level commercial, but the site data table reflects 15,000 square feet. The correct area is 15,000 square feet and not 12,000 square feet. So I just want to make sure that's part of your information as you deliberate on this item. Next slide, please. This is a two-phase vertical mixed-use project. The applicant has indicated in their narrative that is in your packet as well, and for the pleasure of our audience here and our viewing audience, of the total multifamily development, 10% of the, they are proposing a 10% program of the total units to be affordable housing. 5% of those units, which would be 35 units, will cater to active living, 55 and up, and 5% either among the active living, the 35 units, or the traditional multifamily units themselves will be restricted to 70% of the average median income as determined by HUD. So that is a program that they want to do. It is not a TD8CA program, but it's just something that they want to offer as part of the development. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the development itself in terms of the PD and the conditions. The proposed development will be governed by the form-based urban village district and the limited commercial district. But as part of this PD and the base zoning that the applicant is using, they do want to request deviations or modifications to the urban village district itself. And those are related to the compatibility and incompatibility buffers based on what the form-based code requires, and I'll dive into that in a second. The building height requirements, block length requirements, and parking requirements that are currently governed in the urban village district. They are requesting a deviation from that. Next slide, please, Susan. So let's talk a little bit about the incompatibility or compatibility buffers. The RDC very clearly articulates when you are incompatible to an adjacent use and when you have to have a compatibility buffer. So the applicant is using those elements of the Rowlett Development Code to inject into this program. The request is to include those buffers along here that you see in green and that you see in red. So basically, the Rowlett Development Code requires a 15-foot incompatibility buffer. The applicant is proposing a 10-foot incompatibility buffer along here and a 15-foot compatibility buffer to the north. Based on the code itself, these buffers require canopy tree every 35 feet of frontage and 10 shrubs every 30 feet. So basically, 18 trees would be required. They're proposing a reduction in the tree requirement to 13 feet just along the west and no screening mechanism along the north with the exception of the trees plantings along the common area to the north. A 6-foot perimeter ornamental fence is also proposed alongside this or within this incompatibility buffer. Next slide, please. Your packet does not include any elevations, but the applicant was kind enough to provide these to us after the packet was published. The townhomes in the form-based urban village district are limited to 2.5 stories, given its adjacency to property zone single family. The request is to increase those heights to 3 stories. However, when we look at the site plan and the aerial and the proximity to the existing single-family residential area off of Flamingo, for example, staff does not recommend favorably of this increased height. There is no transition that has been put into play between these said uses and could have a negative impact on the well-established residential community to the north. Next slide, please. Block length. The form case code is very clear that block face length has to be between 250 feet and 300 feet. The applicant is requesting this to be 678 feet. Form-based code districts are intended to develop as part of a holistic or integrated development and, deviate from a monolithic structure, which is what results with increasing the block length, the block face. The intent of the form-based code, as I mentioned, is to have a scale development that then does show some compatibility within itself. Next slide, please. The applicant is also reflecting a deviation from the parking requirements. They are required to have 1,123 parking spaces based on the current requirements. They are proposing 1,154. Is that reverse, Carlos?
They are required to do 123 or 1,123, and currently on the site they are showing 1,154. With the reduction, it comes out. Their proposed requirement would be 1,111.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to point out. So we know that they are requesting a minimum reduction of, I believe, 10 parking spaces or 11 parking spaces. Correct?
Comes out to 12 spaces. 12
spaces. Again, the only deviation you can see is for an efficiency, they're proposing 1 parking space for that instead of 1.25 per the code. And in this instance, reducing it from 2.5 for 3 bedrooms that are over 900 square feet to 2 parking spaces per unit. From a parking perspective, staff does not have an objection to this. Next slide, please. We've talked a little bit about the surrounding land use pattern already. We've got residential development along here. We've got single-family development and vacant development along here, and then the Covington's nursery to the south. Next slide, please. The comprehensive plan, when it was updated in 2019, clearly states that this property right here is designated for single-family, low-density single-family development. Low-density single-family development are lots that are between 7,000 and 20,000 square feet. The zoning on the site currently, as it stands, requires minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. Based on the concept plan and the information provided by the applicant, their density would come to approximately 56.6 units per acre. The intensity of this development and the addition of the commercial uses obviously then are not consistent with the comprehensive plan or the future land use plan. Next slide, please. We sent notifications within the 200 and 500 foot notification area. Planning and zoning commissioners, you also received through citizen input numerous emails before 3 p.m. today. 13 notices were sent within the 200 notification area, 32 within 500. 4 responses in opposition within the 200 were received, 1 in favor. And within the 500 foot, there was 5 applications in opposition. Next slide, please. Staff's recommendation is denial of this zoning change request. The future land use plan reflects low density for the development. The proposed concept plan shows incompatibilities with the surrounding land uses, and the proposed deviations from the form-based code do not achieve a holistic approach to the development. With that, I will try and entertain any questions that you might have. The applicant is also present to give their presentation.
Manal, and I've been on vacation. I was out of town most of last week, so I'm not as prepared as I would like to be. Can you give me a better idea of George Bush,
Sure.
Covington's, what the zoning is? Can you go back?
Yep. Susan, let's go to, keep going.
Oh, that one's good. That one. Oh, okay.
Yep.
So where's
This is Covington's, which is commercial.
that whole thing?
Yes, this is Covington's.
Okay.
This is the parcel subject property, and this is Flamingo with the residential development.
And it backs up to my house.
It's not the public hearing yet.
It's not a very big space.
Sorry?
It's not a very big space for even low density residential.
Right, it's.
It looks like it's gonna end up being commercial on the next comprehensive plan. I mean, I don't know how you put residential there.
It could possibly, yes.
I'm just, yeah.
Right, based on, one of the aspects is, the site plan itself or the proposed concept plan is not compatible with the adjacencies, and more thought perhaps needs to be put on that. But more importantly, based on a PD for urban village district, if you're looking at urban village districts, and as you see in your report, a minimum of 20 acres are required to have that type of development, which this site was not.
What's the total acreage here?
12.5.
No, I was saying it's small.
Exactly, and so, the intent of the form-based code, we have specific areas designated to accommodate the form-based code
Yeah.
in those developments.
I'm just thinking, I don't know if residential or, yeah.
Any other questions? And
Is the applicant the owner of the property?
No, they're not.
Are you sure about that?
They are not the owner of the property.
The reason I ask is because if that's, I'm curious what the appraisal district has that classified as, commercial residential use.
Right, but from a zoning perspective, it is zoned as a single family, and any religious institution is permitted in any zoning district.
Right, but they can go back in 3 years and change it, can't they?
Change what? The zoning?
The how it's got, how they appraise it. How they,
Sure, how the appraisal district
yes,
appraises
that's what
property? Absolutely.
that's where I'm going with this. If there's an opportunity for that to be commercial and be a commercial property, which is, in my opinion, would be far more higher value than what this would be, then, but that's a different discussion.
Absolutely, so if there were, any, currently as it's zoned, the property only allows single-family development. And then our comprehensive plan further calls out and says that it should be single-family development, low-density single-family development. That was likely done in order to ensure congruency with adjacencies and adjacent land
Okay.
uses. The request for a PD with urban village district, which is a completely separate development criteria in itself, and to then minimize those requirements and then have the commercial category too. And, it alters the nature of the intent
Exactly.
for, again, the form-based code also requires a minimum of 20 acres. So the applicant, their goal is to be able to develop this site, but with what they're proposing and the density with what they're proposing, it's not congruent with.
Thank you.
questions?
I'm waiting for the developer. Or the applicant.
Mr. Frisbee, did you have a question coming up?
Very brief question. So the existing zoning is single-family,
Yes, it is.
and this is the proposed land use from the comprehensive plan, is the low
Yes, it is.
density?
Yes, it is.
So they both show
Single family.
residential.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
And I wanted to add that my concern, if I were a homeowner, would be traffic and possible increase in noise.
Thank you.
So that would be my two concerns. And I was wondering, like, when you do come up, how, I mean, would that be addressed? Like in that tight area?
Should the request be approved by the city council, should the zoning take effect, then as part of the development site plan review, all those elements are taken under consideration.
Okay.
But when you talk about, let's say, in this case, we are talking about a site plan that is in conjunction with the zoning change request.
Okay.
Now, anything related to access, will a decel lane be required, the deceleration lane, how would the lighting come into play, all those things then are related to code that they would have to comply with those.
Correct. Yeah, like
So
some
the
type of
only
buffer
thing-
or
right,
something.
Whatever you see here are the deviations they're requesting.
Okay. I get what you're saying. Okay.
Okay. If there's no more questions for Ms. Waldad, we will move to the applicant's
They're right here.
presentation. And please state your name and address for the minutes.
Yeah. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is David Weinstein. Address is 495 Broadway, New York, New York. My company is WB Property Group. We're owner-developers, family office, and we develop mostly in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and New York. Typically larger mixed-use projects. And we hold long-term and capitalize most of the deals ourselves.
Just out of curiosity.
Sure.
You say you usually do much larger projects. What attracted you to this spot?
No, we usually do large projects. I misspoke,
okay.
not larger, yeah. Did I say large?
No, you're fine.
I
You're
did.
fine.
This is, formatting, so any, next slide, please. So just wanted to introduce the other members of the team. Unfortunately, both had a family emergency, but McAdams is our civil engineer, who I know does a lot of work here, and they're also have done other projects with us. United Design Architects has worked in the city of Rowlett as well on another project, I believe was Urban Village, and we're working with them on another project as well. Next slide, please. So I'll try not to repeat for everyone's sake of time, but I did want to just state a couple of things. We didn't choose this site because we have a high threshold for pain, and certainly don't want to come here with something where it's an uphill battle. But when we looked at this site, zooming out away from the comprehensive plan, we kind of asked ourselves a few questions, right? Some of the things that we asked ourselves was, single-family adjacency for sure, access and traffic, an issue that you had alluded to. The access is fantastic here off of President George Bush, right? And it's hard to beat this relative to a lot of other sites. And in terms of single-family adjacency, all this back here is flood and creek, and we're staying completely out of the floodplain and the creek itself. There is, of course, in this lot, adjacency where we kept this as open space, and also we put townhomes here to transition from the higher density multifamily to ultimately to the single family. And I also want to mention we met with Covington's today as well to discuss an shared access agreement, which we're certainly, if this were to happen, we would be doing to continue to allow their access here. We've spoken to the neighbor here, Mr. Finney, and he's on board and potentially doing something that would convert SF10 to something that's more commercial or potentially also a residential component. These neighbors as well, we're supportive and ultimately, I guess, would suggest some sort of incorporation with here. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk, in terms of big picture, and the big picture is really how does this relate back to the comprehensive plan, and then also how does this affect, neighbors next to it. So we have a gas station here, we have a nursery here, more commercial, high intensity commercial, and usually in most comprehensive plans, there's a stepping down of intensity of uses. Now, the next step, so to speak, would typically be some form of mid to higher density residential, then lower density residential, and then single family. In this case, we kind of made a conscious decision. Do we want to propose, 4-story elevator, surface parked multifamily that you see a lot of with some other, types? And we made a very conscious decision to propose something that is structured parking, higher end, has 15,000 square feet of retail and commercial. And, I was chatting with Carlos before, and there are not too many office buildings that are being proposed here. And this essentially would host, office and retail within it, where people can come and actually, place make here, right? And come here on the weekends because there are activities. The other thing I wanted to bring up as an aside too, and if we do have the opportunity to talk with neighbors, I so often see developers talk about the amenities in their projects, and I'm always like, what does that actually do to a community if you have a lot of great amenities? So certainly trying to figure out how we can, make that more accessible to the neighborhood as a form of a membership type. So next slide, please. So here was the site plan that you had discussed. Next slide, I don't want to repeat the same. In terms of adjacencies, I'd alluded to some of the, the adjacencies here, but as I started reading some of the feedback, and certainly open to discussing, we completed a rezone in Round Rock, for example, in downtown, which was directly adjacent to a single-family neighborhood and close to downtown. I do see the sensitivity here, and certainly wish we'd talked more about it. I would propose certain things here. I know it was before, but like decreasing townhome sites, adding a berm to plant trees to make a greater buffer, removing balconies and decreasing glazing along that side. So we're certainly receptive to decreasing and lowering impact to that side and that transition. In addition to any other ideas that y'all would have that might help. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show you, I think a lot of times when people hear apartments, senior housing, affordable housing, it's like all created equal and jumbled. We're proposing something that I think is going to be a higher end product, which is consistent with our value to hold long term. And sort of when you look at kind of the separation between the buildings, I always had this vision here of this courtyard, which I think would be really cool for access and also activation at the pedestrian scale, with retail like you see here. Obviously ignoring colors and crazy things like that. Next slide, please. Just some more inspo for townhomes and so forth. One more. Here's an example of some of the additional amenities that we're doing, and the style of it in different projects as an inspiration. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of, I know SF10 is reflective of our parcel here, but I wanted to kind of draw a bigger picture in terms of how we came to think that this parcel might be a good fit for something other than single family. We do plan, we've held projects for 30, 40 years. We actually do plan 30, 40 years out. And so that's how we were looking at this. And so in terms of creating a variety of housing types, I'm very, against this notion of having islands of anything. So whether it's all seniors and assisted living or all affordable housing, I don't think that benefits, never knock how somebody thinks of living or anything, but I think it's great to have a diverse housing stock, right? And you end up putting these affordable islands or something else. So we're putting affordable in, and we're not asking for a dime of subsidies. We've certainly spoken to HFC, which would offer housing tax abatement, but you basically have to sell your land and then lease it, so you don't actually hold long term. So we're not asking for a dime of subsidies. We're trying to make sure that we're also within walking distance and placemaking, so there's retail and mixed use within our community. We're exceeding the open space requirement, also trying to achieve LEED or equivalent. Certainly are open to meeting and continuing any sort of dialogue with the neighbors to improve upon that transition, and certainly can get creative, which we have done in a bunch of other projects. So, with that, certainly open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I thought it was mentioned before, this is a HUD development, or?
This is not HUD.
This is not HUD.
No, the mention of HUD was basically to qualify what income restriction
Oh.
the units would be, and that was at 7%. Yeah, as defined by HUD. We have built with HUD financing. Yeah, separately.
Questions?
Okay. I think we're good with questions for now. Thank you very much. You're a long way from home.
Yeah.
All right, this is a public hearing, so at this time,
Yeah.
I'd like to formally open the public hearing, and I have a stack of cards here, and I'm just gonna take them in the order that I have them. 'Cause I don't know anybody. Well, actually, we've already met, Mr. Bruton. Would you like to come back up, sir?
He has 3 minutes.
And just as a reminder, these are 3 minutes, and Susan over here is going to start timing you if you will state your name and address for the minutes.
Mike Bruton, 5020 Flamingo Drive. I'd just like to say that if all of these things happen, what it's gonna cause our neighborhood, it's not gonna be anything good. We're gonna have traffic congestion, we believe, due to the service road, because the only entrance and exit we have from our street is at the service road. And that's gonna be jammed up big time. The other thing is, I believe, the possibility of flooding. With the cement and everything on the other side, and I believe that there's a possibility exists that we could have flooding in the creek behind us. And finally, I'd like to address something I've dealt with myself personally. It's when you have apartment complexes anywhere, you're gonna have an increase in crime. There's burglaries, thefts, assaults, and even worse. And I feel that our neighborhood will be in great distress if this happens. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Mary Catherine Marston. Please state your name and address for the minutes.
Hi there, I'm Mary Catherine Marston. I am a resident of 5401 Flamingo Drive in Rowlett, Texas. You need this approved. Okay, and so first of all, I would like to say thank you so much for just serving our community and being here tonight, and just all of your hard work that you do for us. And I'm speaking today in opposition of the rezoning of this property. We bought our home in 2015, and we have enjoyed the past 7 years there, and we look forward to many more. One of the biggest reasons for opposing this zoning change is an increase in traffic in the George Bush and 66 area. One of the reasons why we chose our house is because of its location and its access to downtown Rowlett and all the other places. As a teacher and a working mom, my time is really limited, and already because of the traffic in the area, I have to plan when I leave school, when I go run errands, and when I pick my boys up from daycare. And so because of that, I'm just concerned that all of these cars would increase the traffic in the area, making it more difficult for myself and the other residents of Rowlett. And additionally, I'm concerned for the well-being of our neighbors. Many of us chose this area because of the privacy, the closeness to the lake and the creek and trees and things like that. And this rezoning would impact the quality of life for myself and our neighbors. And so I just hope that you hear and listen to my concerns for our community and the negative impact that this would have on our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next card is Mr. Justin Marston.
Good evening, thank you. Thank you for having us. My name is Justin Marston. I'm at 5401 Flamingo Drive. I am here to speak in opposition for the rezoning of 5604 George Bush from low density residential to high density residential. First of all, as you mentioned, the traffic, as has been mentioned several times, traffic starts backing up from southbound George Bush on the exit at about 3 o'clock every day, and it just continues to start backing up on there. The majority of the cars are already trying to turn left from that U-turn lane, which, as we all know, backs up after about 2 cars. And they're trying to get to Flamingo, Carroll Lane as well as Mariner Park community. And sometimes it makes it difficult just getting off of our road onto the service road. There's also a high-density multifamily residential under construction across from the high school. Not sure how many units that has, but that's also going to have an impact as well with the traffic coming from southbound George Bush and going through both of those intersections. So now we would be requesting an additional 1,100 cars through that intersection on top of that development that's already being constructed. So a lot of congestion, and then again with the site plan, there's only one entrance and exit onto the same service road, which you can't get onto George Bush from that location. You know, we would just be increasing the load without the capacity. This goes against the current zoning plan, which the city spends a lot of money on consultants to professionally review and analyze the guidelines, or excuse me, the future populations, the densities, the road infrastructure, to develop guidelines for the city to make recommendations to keep its level of service and improve the quality of life. Rezoning this property will not do either of those things, and I believe that would be a waste of our taxpayer dollars. Lastly, this location being very close to the lake and the stream that feeds into the lake has lots of very large, several healthy trees and a variety of plant species. And with this plan, they will be indiscriminately removed, cleared, paved over to make way for this type of high-density development. This ecological makeup of this site makes it a prime habitat for the local bat populations, which we enjoy seeing. And they are federally protected, by the way, as well as the alligator snapping turtle, which is also protected by the state. So just want to put that out there. So for these reasons, I'm opposed to the zoning change that the development is requesting, and I would like to point out that I'm not against development by itself, but what I am against is development that does not actually plan for this and is obviously going to make a negative impact on our community and our way of our quality of life. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next card is Jenny Sanchez.
My name is Jenny Sanchez, and I live at 5410 Hewitts Cove, Rowlett, Texas. And I've lived in Rowlett for 21 years in the Mariner Park subdivision. I am in opposition of the Rose Creek Plan development based on the following concerns. The request to build 702 multifamily residential units will have adverse impacts to the Mariner Park and Mariner Cove residents that are approximately a mile from this development. The traffic on Highway 66 and Lakeview Parkway and the President George Bush Highway frontage road is already congested during rush hour traffic, and the backup will greatly increase. The residents in the surrounding neighborhoods will have a longer time getting in and out on the President George Bush frontage road. There will be more burden on the schools, there will be more police and fire-related calls, and the increase in fire and police-related calls, the emergency services response time will be longer. I believe that there's too much multifamily density in Rowlett, and this will have an impact on our property values. And I think that there needs to be at least a traffic study or an environmental study done. When he was talking about building, like planting more trees aren't gonna keep cars off the road. And I drive it going to work in Richardson and coming back every day, and traffic's already bad. And it's gonna be really hard to get in and out of our subdivision. And I think that I really want you guys to keep this area as a single-family district, and I appreciate everything you guys do in serving on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. My next card is for Greg Bellamy.
Hello, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, commissioners. My name is Greg Bellamy. I live at 5500 Flamingo Drive. I'm just outside that 500-foot courtesy zone, but I'm also here to speak in opposition to the planned development. My wife and I settled here in Rowlett 2 years ago. So we bought pretty close to the top of the market, moved our son, and our soon-to-be daughter up here. We really like it. The area is very nice. It's a special area, connects to the lake. We've got the Army Corps of Engineers space behind us. There's a whole lot of wildlife back there, including bobcats, frogs of many varieties, of course the turtles, the fish, birds, there's gray herons. It's really wonderful, and I would just hate to have that all taken away from us, which would also crush our property value, which would also add noise and make the area less safe for ourselves and our families. It was zoned single family properties when we bought it. We liked the area to stay that way, obviously, because we're a family. Traffic on 66, as everyone said, is horrible. Also in the PGBT, westbound 66 is an absolute mess. Like, and I don't even go that way, but I feel so bad for everyone who has to sit through 3 or 4 cycles at that light. And because of the lake, there's no real opportunity to add thoroughfares. So like, this should not be considered a place to drop 1,500 people or almost 2% of the population of Rowlett. That would just be absolutely nonsensical. Also, for the walking aspect, like I really think that new developments, especially planning for the next 100 years, they should be walkable places. That's not a walkable place. I'm not sure if you've ever tried to cross there, but like walking across 66 is not a cool feeling. I've done it a couple times. I don't recommend it. I definitely wouldn't let my kids do it. And unless there's anything else, oh, the beauty. Also, you know, there's some really, the lake is a special area, right? And this Army Corps of Engineers area is a very special area, and it's visible to the people who drive by. The 5-story multi-use building would not look good. It wouldn't, like, it would be the tallest thing around in any direction, including this part of town. And there was one other thing, which was, I can't remember it now. I got so nervous. But I think I got most of my points. So please don't do it. It's a wonderful place. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, the next speaker is Mr. Jerry Moore.
Jerry Moore, 5200 Conceptual Drive. I've got some of the same concern. One thing, if you build a 5-story building, I don't know what kind of buffer you're gonna have to listen to redwood. And this is 5, 3, or 2.5, and they're on a hill. There's no way you can buffer that. Rowlett requires 20 acres, we went over that. This is not even close. They mentioned in the study that the sewer line needs to be improved. And he said it had no flow. Let me tell you, I've lived there 50 years. It's overflowed. The 56.6 units per acre is inconsistent with future land use plan. I'm sure you all know that. The floodplain, he said they weren't going to mess with the floodplain. The floodplain's changed since it was studied. I bought the lot 51 years ago. It was a trickle.
Yep.
Now it's got a 12-foot wall, creek, and they fill up. When it rains a lot, it fills up. A couple of times it's even got over that 12, just a little. But you keep adding concrete and roots, it's going to flood. You've added, since I've been there, all this along 66 on that side that drains. I've got a little waterfall comes down behind my house when it rains good. You got the toll road. They said it wouldn't dump water in there. They lied. You got the Target parking lot that floods in there. You got an addition upstream that drops water in there since I've been there. The traffic everybody's mentioned, but they hadn't mentioned one thing. The warehouse district that y'all approved, right down the road at Merritt, it's gonna have a lot on that traffic. Besides this, the traffic's bad now, it's gonna be unbelievable. The recommended action by your committee was that you reject this. I agree with them. please do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. My next card is for Melissa Reynolds.
Me, the loudmouth from New York.
Come on up,
Sorry,
Melissa.
I've been here 40 years. I don't mince words, as you can attest to, I'm sure.
Well, please go up to the little speaker up there.
And I
Mrs.
wrote
Reynolds?
and rewrote and everything. 5700 Flamingo Court, Rowlett, Texas. My property butts up to this proposal. Not happy about it. My husband grew up there, and the house was built before or as Lake Ray Hubbard was being built. He went to school in this building, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. We took care of his father for 5 years. He passed in 2018 and left us the family home. We find the back buffer, which is the only buffer we have between us and the gas station and Covington's, the bowling alley. I can name all those because we can hear them all. The runoff, the erosion of our property since it was built, his father told me you could step over it. It was yay wide. It is now 50 feet wide, and it goes up to the fence that they want to build against, which is, our property is right at that fence. So the creek is part of our property, which is eaten away at our property. So I have to worry about that now. Like they all said, it builds up back there every time there's a rain. We had one day white stuff coming down the creek from the Target area because it wasn't raining, and that ran for 3 days. And I called the city with my concerns then and got no call back. But it stopped after I made my call. You know, it's not good. The traffic, like they all said, is horrendous. The noise from everything is horrendous. This is just gonna make it worse. You know, talk about no privacy. There is gonna be no privacy for any of us on the south side of that neighborhood. And that's all. They all said everything else I agreed with. So, and I'm not a good speaker. I shake, I get upset, and no, I'm not
I think you did fine. You did just fine. And I have one more card for Carolyn Boris.
Sorry, I'm a little shaky from standing forever.
Long time.
I'm going to be very brief. You have heard everything probably that there is to hear. I just find it crazy that we're looking at a property that is zoned S10, and now we're going to look at going to PD for over 700 units. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and I know it doesn't make a lot of sense to you either. So the sole access that you heard is off the Bush Freeway. I drive that many times during the day. It is like the Indianapolis 500 there to get off of 66, and you know what I mean. I'm really not going to go into details. Manal did an excellent job of telling you all the reasons why you should deny this. It does not conform to the intent of the form-based code. It doesn't conform to the future land use plan. It's not consistent with the designation of the low-density residential use intent of the comp plan for this property. So I don't see any reason, and I'm asking you, please think of the neighbors, the traffic, and the future of this piece of property. We want it developed, absolutely, but not with this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there anyone else here that wanted to speak that didn't fill out a card or? Okay. Susan, did you have anything to read? Okay, well, we will formally close the public hearing on this item. Commissioners, discussion, musings. Would you like to, yes, sir. Would you like to, you can call back up staff or the
No.
applicant with any questions you might have.
So I just want to say, I understand the concerns of the residents. I also know that this gets emotional. It's your home, and I totally understand that. But emotion brings sometimes exaggeration. People don't really say what they mean, or they say other things. And if anything's taught us the past 12 years, property values go up. Development typically doesn't hit down property values. And you can scroll the appraisal district rolls, you can scroll them all. I'm not suggesting this is going to make your property values go up, but I'm not suggesting either, as some have suggested, that it's going to kill your property values and it's going to go down either. There's plenty of data to back up both sides, but I think we need to be careful when we start doing that. You don't want the development, you don't like the traffic, you don't like the quality of life, any of that. Totally agree with that. My only thing is just kind of stay away from what's subjective and be very, very objective when it comes to this. But like I said, it's your property. You're the owners of your homes. I'm not going to support this, and I will say that right now for very, very good reasons, as in traffic, as in infrastructure, as in density and things like that. But that is a piece of property, I agree with the last speaker, that needs to get developed. That is a potential development we need to have. This discussion, what is the right development, what is the wrong development, is probably always going to be a major point of discussion with the community. I would tell you that right now, which I would suggest that y'all get organized, find something you can probably live with and get behind. Growth is inevitable. But with that said, people are moving to Texas not by the hundreds, not by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. Let's be very clear of that. And this is not unique to Rowlett. This is going on in every community out there. What's out there, and there are communities out there that are putting up thousands of apartment units, as I'm sure the applicant knows, in different cities out there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion. I appreciate that. Just want to express that.
Thank you, Peter. That was a good segue. I did want to say some things because I'm a resident, of course, of Rowlett, and I certainly understand your feelings, and I'm not going to support this tonight either, mainly because of the density, and I just don't believe it's in alignment with the size of the property, but it is a very valuable piece of land for its location. And it does kind of scream commercial in a lot of ways. I mean, we got to look at this realistically. And that's why these developers transition these types of properties in a lot of ways. There's a lot of unique ways to do it. However, the thing that I really wanted to talk about was what y'all are more concerned about with traffic and flooding. This city, and I've been here working with them for a long time, they do everything right as it relates to traffic studies. We've looked at a lot of them since I've been on this commission. And retention for flooding. All of that has to be accounted for by the books. And that will all have to be worked out no matter what goes in here. So don't worry about that. I mean, understand what you're feeling, and you're not wrong to think about it, but I want you to feel safe that the staff here will take care of it because there's rules in place that they have to follow. Anything else? Anybody? Mr. Cote?
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and kind of echo what people have to say, is it's going to get developed somewhere, okay? For the developer, for the applicant, though, to walk in here and ask me to rezone it using a tool that doesn't fit that requirement and then don't want to meet any of the requirements of that requirement or that tool that you're using is a non-starter. So I'm definitely not going to be behind that.
Mr. Ringen?
Yeah, I just, well, first off, I just want to thank you, Mr. Weinstein, for coming here tonight and to talk about your development. And I think it's unique in some ways. That's a little bit different. But I think you missed a major point tonight. And we have found this with other developers that have come before the staff. And you heard it from the people that you have to have a connection. You really need to meet with the neighborhoods, because we have found that when other developers have actually finally sat down and talked with commercial property people or family residential areas, how can you tie your development into their living? Because we don't want in our community a hodgepodge of apartments and nice homes, and it just doesn't quite fit the flow of things. But that's why you got to get the feedback from them first. Then you can come back and develop something with their ideas included with a lot of what you have. So, I mean, you have good ideas, but there's a misconnection tonight of talking with neighborhoods. And that's what we find within our community. We're a growing community. A lot of people are coming here for, being residential. We're not a large commercial base here, but they like the home idea of being here. And, but yeah, there's many things. I go along George Bush. I take Liberty Grove back and forth 100 times a day, and there's a ton of traffic in that area. And right now, you're competing against a very wooded area, which I would like to see stay as SF10 residential areas. But I just want to pass that on to you if you come back to do another project, because I think you have some good ideas.
Can I just respond to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we certainly, we submitted back in May, and our project here actually, and we, in most other cases, certainly welcome any neighborhood meeting and would have loved to actually sit down and had reached out, even though we received the neighborhood feedback maybe like last week. So it was certainly take responsibility for that. If we do have another opportunity, we would do it that way, as we have in the past.
Yes, sir.
I would like to make a couple of points. The first is that, at least I don't want to speak for the commission, but I always take staff's recommendations and staff's research and perspective very much into account. So anytime that I as a commissioner get a case before me that shows that staff is against it, that's a big strike against the developer to begin with. And because the community does have a set of development rules and guidelines, number one, that we have to respect. The second is that we really do have some very fine professionals working on the staff, and I know that in the past that they've gone out of their way to try to find creative solutions to try to produce a better product in the end for the community. So that's the first point. The second point, I always have a lot of respect for the citizens. They're the ones, they're the taxpayers, they're the voters, they're the most important stakeholder, because as you know, most individuals, their number one investment is their home, financially speaking. So we have to respect that. That said, just like Commissioner Engen said, I like the idea, the concepts that you're bringing forward in terms of the quality, the look. I just don't think that the high-density residential is the component that we're looking for here. I agree with our chairwoman, Ms. Esteves, that this property does want to go commercial. The single family is probably not the best, highest and best use. Is that the proper word, Manal? Yes. We're looking for that, whatever that is. So going forward, I would, as Mrs. Esteves you said, we would really encourage you as the developer to, number one, engage your community, your neighbors, and work with them and come up with a creative solution. As you know, the city of Rowlett, a lot of our tax base is unfortunately residential, and we don't have as a proportion as much of the commercial. So as a community, it's very valuable to us to really maximize what little commercial real estate we have left available. So what I'm trying to say is I would like to really have you and your peers, your other professionals that you're working with, advise you and creatively come up with something that's workable, that would fit well on this particular property or another property in the area that would suit your needs, but on the other hand, fit the needs of the community as well. So that in a nutshell is what I would offer for you.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
We really need to, we closed the public hearing, so, okay. Anything else? Any other comments? All right, I'm ready for a motion. Mr. Cote.
I'll make a motion to deny the request to rezone the subject property from single-family SF10 to a planned development district for mixed residential and commercial FBUV and C1 uses.
We have a motion on the floor for deny. We have a second by Mr. Ingen. All in favor? And that passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Let's see if there's a supermajority on city.
And the meeting is adjourned.